Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV, and today's Monday, May 18th. So we begin week 8, I believe, yeah. It's episode 36. 5 episodes a week means we've done 7 weeks, and this is week 8. Hope you're enjoying it. For those of you who've watched TechStrong TV before, you know what to expect. For those who don't, buckle in, strap in. I think you're going to be in for a nice ride. Couple of things. I want to remind everyone, we're getting close to June 4th, TechStrongCon.com. Go check out. We have over 30 amazing speakers. It's 12 hours strong of TechStrong, focusing on, there'll be 4 separate tracks: emerging technology, DevSecOps, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and then tools spotlight, community spotlight. So I all great with great speakers in each one of these. So take a look at that. Let us know what you think. Register. It's free. It's going to be beyond the speakers. There's exhibit halls, Q&A sessions, challenges, all kinds of stuff going on. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Also, if, as usual, for those who don't know, we do have a companion Slack channel, TechStrongTV.slack.com. You can join it over at TechStrong.tv. If you have any questions for us or any of the guests that we interview here on our show. That being said, let's jump into today. We have a really strong lineup of content today. Our first guest is going to be Craig Hinckley, the CEO of White Hat Security. Craig's coming to us from Vancouver. And we're going to be talking, White Hat was just named as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for application security testing. I think this is the 5th year out of the 7 years that Gartner has done a quadrant in that space. Craig's going to talk to us about that and what White Hat's doing to stay on top of the pack in application security as it's evolved and changed. And some good information. I always enjoyed talking with Craig. He's an old friend. Also, we have a new security company, or new for us anyway, but I think they're about 3 years old. Sempris, who just raised a $40 million Series B, led by our friends at Inside Partners. And I have their CEO, Mickey Bresman, on with us, and he's going to talk about what they're seeing around ransomware and protecting, securing directories and information. So a good interview with Mickey. Then we're going to do our, something old for the day. And old for the day today is coming to us from the RSA APJ DevOps Connect DevSecOps Days event that Mark Miller and I produce every year. Happy to report we're going to be producing one in July in Singapore again this year. But this one is from last year. It's my friend Stefan Strohbier. Stefan is the CEO of Guardrails, open source based DevSecOps play. And Stefan does a really good job on this one. It's about the importance of DevSecOps, and I enjoy listening to Stefan. He's bright guy, really has his finger on the pulse. I think you'll like this one from the archives. Then I'll do a news wrap-up as usual. We'll tend to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. She has a couple of good interviews today. Then we'll hear from Mitchell Ashley in the analyst corner with Mitch. And then today's Monday, so we have a channel roundup with the one and only Mike Vizard, and he'll have his sidekick, Frank Ohlhurst, with him on that one. And then we have episode 2 of the Threat Insight video cast from the folks at Gigamon's team. And that'll be on at the end of today's show. And then we'll wrap things up. So again, it's probably 3 hours plus worth of some amazing content on TechStrong TV today. Stay tuned. I think you're going to enjoy it. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 Hours Strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacigalupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Hey everyone, back here in the studio. As I mentioned, our first guest on today's show is my friend Craig Hinckley. Craig is the CEO of White Hat Security. White Hat was one of the pioneers in the application security testing space. Another friend of mine, Jeremiah Grossman, actually founded the company probably 10, maybe 15 years ago even. Craig's been CEO for about five plus years now. And of course, White Hat was acquired by NTT. And what was NTT Security about a year ago. It's now part of NTT Limited, which is a combination of NTT Security and NTT Communications and some other divisions. But White Hat is still operated as a separate entity within NTT, and they were just named as a leader in the Gartner Quadrant, in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for application security testing. This is like the 5th time in the 7 years that Gartner's done this quadrant that WhiteSource is a leader. They continue to maintain a dominant position in the market. And this is a market where technology has changed. There have been a lot of, Johnny-come-latelys and new entrants in the market with some great product. But White Hat and service, and White Hat's managed to stay on top. Craig's going to talk to us about why and what he sees coming and what White Hat has in store for us in the future as well. So let's go to our interview with Craig Hinckley, White Hat's CEO.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, back here on TechStrong TV with our next guest. I'm really happy to be joined by an old friend of mine. Well, he's not old, but we've been friends a long time. Craig Hinckley, CEO of White Hat Security. Hey, Craig, welcome.
Hey, Alan. And actually, I think I am getting older by the day, my friend.
If you are, I am, so don't go so fast. But anyway, hey, Craig, that's a beautiful shot of picture there behind you, and we were talking about it off camera. That is, it's not Vancouver Harbor.
It's no. It's Cole Harbor in Vancouver, Canada. Absolutely. Which is as I said.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I'm trying to think when I was there, I remember sitting and drinking Bloody Caesars and watching the planes land. Is that the harbor where they land, like right there?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly the harbor. So and they're actually down to minimal flight service, but normally I can sit here and watch the planes take off and land in the harbor here. It's gorgeous, as you know.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, beautiful. Now, of course, Craig, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got stuff to cover. But you don't live in Vancouver permanently. You are a COVID refugee, right? Went up to visit your daughter and got stuck as the border closed. So you and your wife have been there now for about 6-7 weeks.
That is correct.
There's worse places to be stuck than Vancouver. I will tell you that. You lucked out there, my friend. Anyway, Craig, of course, you're CEO now of not now, you've been CEO of White Hat Security. It's got to be about 5 years, right? 4 or 5 years at least.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. And, of course, White Hat Security was acquired by NTT Security. I'm going to say it was 2 years ago, Craig, 1.5 to 2 years ago.
We actually closed the acquisition on July of 2019. So we announced it in March and closed in July. So it's just coming up to a year.
Wow. Okay, it was just a year. Man, I lost a year there somehow. But anyway, and now, of course, as luck would have it, I was telling you off camera, we actually interviewed Damien from NTT Limited, and he explained to us how NTT has kind of rolled up 31 acquisitions they did that were part of NTT Communications, NTT Security, and then it was Dimension Data. So I don't know if it was NTT Data or what, but these are all rolled up into one entity called NTT Limited with about 45,000 employees and about $12 billion in revenue. But White Hat, is part of that, but still operates as sort of a separate business unit, if you will, within the NTT.
Yeah, so absolutely, Alan. So when we did the acquisition, they set White Hat up as an independent, wholly owned subsidiary of ultimately NTT Security slash NTT Limited. And when we did the acquisition, I mean, that was a couple of core tenets of the acquisition for NTT was one, that we brought application security to their managed security service offerings. So we were able to provide, allow NTT Security to provide what we believe is the most comprehensive cybersecurity offering to the marketplace, because we can now secure from the infrastructure to the applications, and NTT now brings together then the consulting and all the managed services and the tech services to be able to deploy and kind of operationalize, the cybersecurity technologies for our clients. So it was a great acquisition from a tech perspective. And then, as you said, from a go-to-market perspective, we're now part of a 45,000 person strong organization that operates in over 100 countries. So for us, the exciting thing is we get to tap into a global go-to-market engine to accelerate the growth of the White Hat business.
Fantastic. And, Craig, our audience here on TechStrong TV kind of encompasses all of our different communities that we, serve at MediaOps. And so we've got dev and DevOps and container, cloud native folks, and of course the cybersecurity community and digital transformation. Not everyone may be familiar with White Hat. But White Hat, Jeremiah Grossman founded the company. It's got to be 15 something years ago, I bet. And it really pioneered, AppSec wasn't a thing then, right? Jeremiah had left Yahoo Security, and the idea of securing applications. And then White Hat really was the first to have sort of a, hey, run this scan, if you will, on your application, right? A do-it-yourself scan that showed you, where your AppSec problems were. Then, of course, fixing them and everything else. So White Hat has been a pioneer, continues to be a pioneer in this whole AppSec space. So, and it's amazing, when you look at the how long it's been that it's remained right up there in the leaders.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been great. I mean, so yeah, Jeremiah founded the company 20 years ago, and you're absolutely right.
Was it 20?
Yeah, it's 20 years ago. So
we are getting old, Craig.
We are, and I've been fortunate for the last 5 years to carry that legacy on. And as you said, now as application security has matured, as now we think about the whole digital economy and digital transformation, and I think no more truer even now with COVID-19 as people are rushing online, with then the push from testing apps in production, which White Hat really pioneered and was the first, not in addition to testing apps in production, and still today is the only company that tests apps in production, but doing it from a cloud SaaS-based offering versus a tool that you needed to buy and deploy. And now obviously shifting left, as you and I have talked about many times, about the whole DevSecOps and how do you embed security into the software lifecycle to secure the whole digital factory. It's been a great last 5 years, and with the acquisition, now we're continuing to drive innovation and leveraging all parts of the NTT organization to advance the whole DevSecOps environment as well.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I didn't mention it. I mean, really, again, not only pioneering AppSec and AppSec scanning, but that's kind of SaaS-based AppSec. It was just another kind of first out there. So speaking of leaders, Gartner recently came out with their AppSec Magic Quadrant, right? And White Hat was named the leader again.
Yes, they were. We're very proud of that fact.
I'm sure. Just for giggles,
in the leaders quadrant.
How many times?
Fifth time in the leaders quadrant.
How many times have they had an AppSec quadrant?
I think 7 or something. So there's only been a couple of times we weren't in the leaders quadrant.
That's what I was going to say. Pretty much every time, Craig. But that's good. I'd rather be, a funny story. I remember selling security. I'm selling security where I'm in Quantico, Virginia, at the Marine base there, and meeting with some folks from Navy and Marines for the NMCI network. And a Marine colonel says to me, "Well, did you make them Gartner quadrant. I said, yes, we're actually a visionary in the quadrant, which I was really proud of that. And he told me, well, if you're not in that top right, it don't mean nothing. Right? And so if you're not in the leaders, visionary, and that's when I said, I'm not going to argue with a Marine. They got hard heads. But it's better to be a leader than not a leader, Craig, and it's important. But give us a little, we don't have the report in front of us, but give us a little background. What did the Gartner folks say why White Hat was worthy of being in the leaders quadrant?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, Gartner recognized that White Hat has been a leader and been a pioneer in the space, and they named us number one for application security testing for public-facing web applications. They also named us number two for both enterprise testing as well as mobile and client testing. And then also Gartner does their peer insights where they have clients actually come in and rate each of the vendors for service and support and capabilities. And we're in the top, we're number two, if not number one, in the peer insights. And that's where the customer's saying that great support, great service. And that's really, I'd say, with the greatest pride over the last 3 years we've done as a company, is really focus about how do we put White Hat at the center of our client's business? Not them to us to them. How do we actually understand what they're trying to solve from an application security perspective? And how do we deliver the capabilities from a platform and technology? But also more importantly now, how do we bring the service, the support, and all the other things that they need to operationalize that and deliver the business outcomes they need? And I think they're the reasons that Gartner acknowledged what White Hat's been doing. The NTT acquisition also obviously hugely improves our global scale and reach and ability to service and support clients on a global basis. But then the big shift was around the vision. So the work we've done in really bringing all of the DAST, the dynamic, the static analysis, software composition analysis, and bringing them across that whole software lifecycle. And Gartner's been impressed with how we've been really working and delivering vision in this space. Even 20 years on, the work that the team's been doing around API security. We just launched a new API security, automated API security testing, which we think is huge moving forward.
Yep. Hey, Craig, I'm just checking my AirPod here a second. I probably need my other one if you could. But, Craig, you mentioned public cloud-facing APIs, app scanning. And I guess, one of the biggest things that's changed over the last 3 years, maybe a little more, is the kind of the move to a containerized microservices, Kubernetes kind of environment. And I'm just wondering, how has that affected things for you over in White Hat?
Yeah, so absolutely. The whole cloudification and digital transformation that companies are undergoing. We can talk maybe a little bit later if we've got time. COVID-19 is absolutely accelerating that digital transformation. Every company now realizes they've got to have a digital strategy, e-commerce, call it the virtual business front door, because the physical doors are shutting, if not shut down. Mm-hmm. But for us, we've seen that push towards clouds, containers within our customer base. And we've focused on some of those aspects, but also APIs. We see APIs as a major area of focus for companies, because as they're building their digital first applications, a lot of that integration now is done through APIs. So if I go back, back when we had the applications inside the four walls of a data center, you almost had like a service bus. And, TIPCO at the time was a great example. They built a service bus that connected all the different systems and applications.
I remember it well.
Yeah, but now, it's unfortunate. It's the age thing again, mate, for you and I. But now, in this digital economy, in this cloud-based economy, that service bus is now being replaced with APIs. The API is now the fabric that ties all of these capabilities together, and companies are now pulling capabilities from each other, and therefore APIs are the glue that ties it all and brings it all together and delivers it as an integrated service for the client. So we've been focused heavily on that, and really it's clients leading us there as well, like listening to our clients, understanding where they're going from a business development perspective, application development, and they really led us into this whole API security space. So that's been a big push. And the other one is taking our leadership position in dynamic production testing and be able to apply that production testing all the way back into the development cycle. So we're developing and we've been previewing with Gartner and other clients an intelligence-driven DAST product where we actually can take the dynamic testing and apply it during release times and code build times. We actually can test the production level code during development. So I think that's been the greatest thing that we've done since we brought on Joseph Feynman, who actually created the Gartner Magic Quadrant for application security testing. Tony Bettini, who's joined us as the CTO, really hunkering down and making sure that working with our Chief Revenue Officer, David Geary, really tapping into the market to get the insights from the revenue team, and then really building the right strategy with Joseph from a market perspective and Tony from the CTO, translating that into brand new products and innovation with API and DAST, and the work we've done with our software, application security testing, the source code. We're delivering to clients not just here's where the vulnerability is, but also here's a code snippet of how you'd actually go fix that. So more and more, we're trying to really help our clients not just find it, but help them rapidly fix those defects to reduce their business risk.
And of course, DevSecOps is kind of in our wheelhouse, right? And it's where our Security Boulevard and DevOps kind of overlap. And one of the things we see there, and you just kind of mentioned it in passing about, hey, here's a code snippet that helps you fix that. So that's the kind of solution that's not necessarily aimed at the security guy or gal. It's aimed at the developer, because more and more these tools are being used by developers. It may be the security team budget, and the security team has to sign off or whatever. But really, if you're not making tools that the developers are going to use to make their code better, the kind of thing you just mentioned, you're doomed. You're doomed for failure. There aren't enough security people, and they don't get in early enough to fix that in time.
Well, Alan, I agree with you. And whether, while White Hat has come from and still focuses very much on the security teams, the CISO, as you said, that's a lot of where the budget still resides. One of the things that we've realized at White Hat is that if we could double the size of ethical hacking teams, double the size of application security teams in the CISO world, that's still not enough.
It still wouldn't be close to enough, right?
Not enough. If we really are going to solve and help reduce the kind of business risk around application security, it's fixing it at the source, and that's no pun intended, but it actually is, how do we bring into this battle, because we're in a war. I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a fight. Every day it's a battle of us versus the hackers and the
bad guys,
threat actors. Exactly. If we're truly going to win this war, it's about mobilizing the 20 and 30 million developers to help them write more secure code. And I think we have to come at it differently as an industry too, because there's this battle between the security teams often and the development teams, of the security team seen as the Department of No, and the developers are seen as the code jockeys who are just putting bad code out into the world. And neither of that is true. I mean, developers don't come to work saying, I'm going to write insecure code today. They're doing the best they can, but we've got to help them understand how they can write more secure code and bring them into this fight with us. And if we do it, and that's one of our missions, if we do that effectively, we now mobilize 30 million people to help reduce the vulnerabilities in the application, so we close that attack surface off, to the bad actors.
Little empathy goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Would work in American politics too, but let's not go there right now.
Let's not go there.
And I will tell you, we talk about the number of developers in the world. The last numbers I saw talking to the GitHub folks were closer to 40 or 42 million, and growing 20% a year. Right? If developers were a nation, they'd be the fastest growing country on earth, and it's crazy when you think about it. So. And at the same token, while cybersecurity has, exploded, the amount of cybersecurity people is still minuscule compared to that number, right? A fraction of a fraction. So it's the only way. You and I have had this discussion. We know it. It's the only way it's going to work. Anyway, Craig, we're about out of time, man. Hey, it's fantastic seeing you with that beautiful picture behind you. Enjoy your time in Vancouver. It will come to an end, though. They will let you back in here eventually, man.
I hope so. Hopefully, when I get to the border, they'll let me cross back into the US.
Well, it's either that or you just move headquarters up there. You got 45,000 people. You must have some people in Vancouver. Anyway, hey, Craig, it's always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Be well, be strong and healthy there, and we'll be in touch soon.
You too, man. Right? Cheers.
All righty. Craig Hinckley, CEO. Thank you. Craig Hinckley, CEO of White Hat Security here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
On to our next interview, folks. This next one features the CEO of a fairly new security company called Semperis. Semperis has been around for about 3 years. Its CEO, Mickey Bresman, is someone who was in the Israeli and the IDF, Navy, I believe, and then worked for some large banks in the cyber department. Started Semperis, went into consulting, and then started Semperis as a product services company. He's based in the New Jersey area, but New York City area. And Semperis just announced a $40 million Series B, led by our friends at Insight Partners. And they've been really doing a good job as ransomware has grown rampant recently here, and we see what's going on. So here's my interview with Semperis CEO Mickey Bresman.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us for this segment. My guest this segment is Mickey Bresman, CEO of Semperis. Mickey, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hi Alan, great to be here.
Thanks. It's nice to have you here. So Mickey, let's get news out. Actually, before we get to the news, I don't know if we've ever interviewed anyone from Semperis before. So why don't we start with a little bit about, what's Semperis, what's the company about? You're the CEO. What's your background? Why don't we lay that down first, and then we'll get to the news.
Sure. So Semperis is all about cyber resilience and threat mitigation, where what's unique in terms of what we're doing is the focus on the identity aspect of it. To a degree, the company approach is the term that we quite often use is the cyber first approach to disaster recovery, which basically means that we are looking at the disastrous side of cybersecurity, but from the view of cyber and not from the view of earthquake as an example. The main focus that we have is around identity, and more precise, the Active Directory platform, which is the most common identity platform out there by Microsoft that is used by basically any organization in the world. And we provide, I would say, generally 3 things. We provide the pre-attack scanning for vulnerabilities and then the indicators of exposure that's shown to the customer so he will be able to close those gaps before he's being attacked. Then we also help with during the attack stage by basically showing what changes are being done in the Active Directory environment. What we're most known there is for our auto-remediation ability, basically the ability to stop the attack as it's starting to happen. And then the post-attack stage, where if everything has been fully wiped out, the WannaCry, NotPetya, Local Goga type of situations, instead of spending days, that's what it takes on average to recover the Active Directory, we provide the ability to do the same thing in a matter of minutes up to hours.
Excellent. Excellent. And then, Mickey, your background a little bit?
My background, well, I started my technical career in the Navy. That was, about 20 years back. I've been on the consulting side. I've worked for one of the larger banks in Israel for almost a decade. Then started my own professional service company as a CTO. Done consulting in the Microsoft identity and cloud space, I would say. Until we came with the need for something like Sempris, and from there it was all about Sempris.
Absolutely. All right, got that out of the way. Let's talk about the news. You guys have been busy fundraising. Recently announced, yes?
Yep. Yeah. So it's been what I would say probably fundraising is never fun. But in this case, I would say that it actually was. And the reason being was that the company actually has been very profitable for the last, I would say, year and a half or so, which basically put us in a position where we are raising funds because we want to, not because we need to. And we have seen a lot of growth. Mostly in the US, that was our main focus, and we serve some of the biggest enterprises in the world today. Many of them are in the US, but also some local government and so on. And we have expanded during 2019. We have expanded to APAC with places like Singapore and to Europe. So having a partner like Insight, that's the fund from which we have raised funds, was definitely a huge, significant milestone for us with all the help that we are getting from them. So besides as you've mentioned, a large funding event, it's also a partner that can definitely help you with best practices for the hyper growth stage, which apparently that's where we are.
Excellent. And just to make it clear, I don't want to say anything that's confidential, but from the public information, this latest round was a $40 million round led by Insight, and it brought your total funding to $54 million. Is that correct?
It is.
Excellent. Good. And along with the funding, 2 new members of your board. One is an Insight person, and one was from another VC, Silver. I forget which one now.
Silvertech, if you're probably familiar with Silverstein Properties, one of the biggest real estate. Well, you're from New York region, so you definitely know Silverstein Properties.
Yeah.
So they have a venture fund called Silvertech Ventures. It's them and additional 2 other individuals, generally speaking. And Charlie Federman, who is a very well-known figure in the investment and technology space. I mean, he had an amazing career, still has, joining us as a board member, in addition to Teddy Wardy, that is joining from Insight.
Absolutely. And of course, our audience is no stranger to Insight companies. We cover DevOps, cybersecurity, cloud native, digital transformation. And that happens to be where Insight does a significant amount of investing as well. So we just had Thomas Crane, a principal from Insight on, I think, last week. And then I think on today's show that we streamed, Emmett Keefe replayed a presentation he had done for us. So we, and we follow a lot of the insight. And you're right, they are a great partner, and they have a strong presence, obviously, in Israel, where they bought a large venture-backed fund. But worldwide, they have the presence. No matter, as you mentioned, Singapore is a big area. But beyond the money, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for me personally, being based in the New York area, as we previously discussed, the company's headquarters in the days where you can actually go to the office is in the World Trade Center. And that's 3 train stops away, again, on the days where it makes sense to take a train.
Right. When we used to do those things.
Yeah, sounds like ages ago.
Right.
But that's 3 stops away from the Inside office in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been to their office, actually. So, you brought up this whole COVID thing. So first of all, look, with everything going on, it's a good time to raise money. If you don't need it right now, put it away, because who knows, how long this situation goes on and when we return to whatever the new normal is. How, at the same time, what we've seen, along with the COVID pandemic of the virus to people, we've also seen a cyber pandemic of people, taking advantage of the situation and COVID-related cybersecurity threats. I'm wondering if you guys have been seeing that in as you're in your business there. Are you seeing an increased kind of threat level as a result of this?
We should do. I think that, I don't remember who said it first, but no hacker will, I'm not sure that hacker is a good way to put it here, but no cyber criminal will give up a good disaster.
Right.
And we have definitely have been seeing it. Some of the things that even to a degree kind of observe, where we've seen a cyber criminals group basically stating that they will not be going anymore after any healthcare providers, hospitals, and so on. And just 2 days afterwards, one of the hospitals goes down following an attack that came from that group specifically. For us, we have a lot of customers in the healthcare space, hospitals, but also the biggest healthcare provider in the US. And I think one of the things that we have noticed, and I'm personally very happy and proud of, is one of the hospitals here in New York, the bigger one. They basically were in the center of the pandemic. And if you think about their situation about probably 2 months ago, where everything was kind of being in the peak, they still made it a high priority. They acquired our solution just a few weeks before that. And they made it a high priority to make sure that they deploy it even during the pandemic times. So our solution is relatively simple to deploy. It takes a couple of days and you are done. But it was really important for them to have it in place if in case they've been hit by ransomware, so they'll be able to continue and get back to operations basically as soon as possible.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about ransomware, Mickey. I remember a friend of mine, Jeremiah Grossman, was founder of White Hat Security, pretty well known in security. I remember seeing him give a presentation, it had to be 3 years ago, where ransomware was going to be maybe a $400 million worth of business of ransomware that year. And then for this year, I've seen numbers as high as $20 billion in ransomware. It certainly moved beyond just being a nuisance where you pay some. The question was, do I give them $300, $400, or $1,000 in Bitcoin, or the heck with them, right? It's gone much more upstream, much more expensive, much more of a real threat since then, hasn't it?
So I would say 2 things on when it comes to ransomware. The first one, general recommendation that I strongly believe in, is that you should not pay. You don't know where that money is going. Now, of course, it's very easy to say so when you're not sitting there with your entire business completely shut down. But the general approach that we have, you don't know where the money is going. You don't know, it's definitely not going for anything good. It might be used in buying real weapons that will be used against our soldiers. It might be going to drug trafficking and so on and so forth. So the general assumption is that you should not encourage criminals by paying the ransomware. This is not the right thing to do. With that said, if you recall about a year-ish ago, there was something that was called the Pledge of the Mayors, where basically the different mayors came together and said, we will not be paying ransomware, basically for the same reason that I've just said now. And then at the time, what I said was that this is a great statement, but you need to be able to back it up. You can't just say, I'm not going to pay and that's it. You need to be able to do something about it. Now, it's a bit surprising, but during the next 2 weeks, I was interviewed almost on a daily basis because of what I said. And all I said was what seems to me a very logical step. If you do not want to pay ransomware, make sure that you have a backup and recovery solution in place. Make sure that you know what your disaster recovery plan should look like. Make sure that you have tested it and you actually can trust what you have. Because otherwise, it's just a statement with nothing behind it.
Absolutely. So let's give some advice to people watching. Let's say, look, from a corporate point of view, it's very easy to back up their AWS or their public cloud infrastructure or even on-prem infrastructure. What about, everyone's working from home right now, Mickey, right? And let's say whether we use Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive or iCloud, right? And you got people who say, well, I'm backing up all my files to OneDrive, for instance. But yet OneDrive keeps a local copy on your machine. If your machine gets ransomwared, it'll ransomware, from what I know, and you would know better than me, it'll ransomware your OneDrive in the cloud as well, correct?
So I'll tell you two things. The first one, I would not pretend to be, me personally, an expert in the endpoint protection, definitely not for the consumer side as well, because I've spent my entire career on the enterprise side of things. But the same challenge actually exists with the enterprise as well, but the bit of a twist. Because what enterprises, and we had a customer as an example that we got a call, the customer got encrypted end-to-end, the entire organizations worldwide. And the first challenge that they had was the backup server was encrypted. So how do you stop that situation? So our general recommendation to customers, and this is again, general recommendation can probably be used for people on the personal life as well. Make sure that you have an offline backup. Make sure that it's not only what you have online. Make sure to have a periodical refresh of that backup. So every once in a while, make sure that you have your offline backup and that you actually update it. That is probably going to be the most helpful. And make sure that you have the ability to actually access that backup, because sometimes people don't think about it, but if your passport documentation, as an example, is in your OneDrive and that OneDrive is now encrypted, you're going to have a loop. So that's kind of what we're saying. Make sure that you actually tested and you understand what you should be doing during the time of the disaster, so you will not encourage some sort of an issue like that during the actual disaster itself. So test it before you do. You will be surprised, but we came across huge organizations where the disaster recovery plan with all of the documentation of what should be done is actually stored on the server that during their disaster recovery testing should have been offline. And then it's like, okay, what do we do now?
Agreed. You know what? You got me thinking I'm going to go do an offline. What? And of course, we're seeing this more and more now, even during COVID, because I think people are more susceptible. Maybe they're not as vigilant, with their security and stuff. Let's return. We don't have a lot of time left, Mickey. I apologize. It goes very quickly, but let's go back to the raise with Insight. You've been profitable 6 quarters in a row, so it's not like you need the money to keep the lights on. What other than putting it in a mattress or in an interest yielding account, what are you guys going to do with this money? Right? How is it going to accelerate the Sempris story?
Sure. So we are actually one of those companies that are hiring during these times of COVID, and we're mostly accelerating on the R&D side of the house. That we're expanding our offering to cover the cloud identity providers as well, but then also spreading all across the security posture. And as you know, hackers never stop, or I should say cyber criminals to be more precise, they never stop. There are new attacks coming out all the time. And it's our job to make sure that we are as fast as they are and faster when possible. So we are hiring on all the R&D sections, and if you are watching this show, and you are welcome to go to the website and see the job positions that we have posted there. But we're also hiring on basically every department. If it's sales, if it's pre-sale, post-sale engineers, incident response, we have it all right now.
Excellent. Good stuff. Mickey, we're almost out of time. First of all, congratulations on the raise. You know, it's an interesting time to be raising money, but it's always better to, someone much smarter than me once told me, it's always better to raise money when you don't need it. And, so congratulations on that. Also, man, just keep up the great work because, I mean, knock wood, I've never been a victim of ransomware up to this point. But I have been the victim of hacking and stuff like that during my life. Until you've actually been through it, you don't realize how kind of violated it makes you feel, right? That someone does this to you. And so companies like Sempris that are preventing this and working on it, it's good work, right? It really, we talk about white hats and black hats and hackers and not all hackers are necessarily evil. But, trying to fight the good fight here and doing what's right, not that no one's saying you do it for free and it's the way you earn a living, but it's a good fight. It's good to be on that side of the road, right? Versus another side. So keep up the great work, man.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it. And we do have a sense of a mission in Sempris for sure. And to your point, and that's why I'm kind of cautious with using the term hackers, we do employ what we'll refer to as hackers, but basically with the idea of helping prevent and helping point out the weaknesses before the bad hackers actually do something about it. And thank you.
Excellent. You're welcome. Hey, be well. We'll check in with you. Stay safe during all of this. Mickey Bresman, CEO of Sempris, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, back here in TechStrong TV studios. So our next guest, it comes from the archives. It's our Something Old segment for today's show. This was a session that we had filmed and produced over at RSA APJ. So RSA Conference APJ 2019. By the way, it's virtual this year. It's open for registration, RSAC APJ. You can head over to RSAC to get information on that. And we will be putting on a DevSecOps event with it. I've already been working with Mark Miller on that. But this episode is from one of my dear friends out in that neck of the woods, corner of the world, Stefan Straubauer, and I mispronounce his last name. It's hard, but I just call him Stefan. Stefan is CEO of Guardrails, open source DevSecOps play. He's also been in the security consulting business for some time. Stefan actually is based in both Jakarta and Bangkok, and he's in Singapore quite a bit as that corner of the world. Singapore is a sort of gravity center for business and technology. Stefan did a presentation on the importance of DevSecOps, and here it is now. I think you'll enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here today. Hey, Fabian. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. And I'm going to talk about the state of DevSecOps for the next 30 minutes. So for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Stefan. Don't worry too much about my last name. It's very hard to pronounce. And I've been in security for the last 15, 16 years. So I actually started out as a penetration tester when I was like roughly around 2006. And I've really seen how the security industry kind of transformed over the last 15, 16 years. And this is part of the experience I'm going to talk about today. And since then, I've had many different roles and many different experiences. And recently, I've also started actually a security platform or like a DevSecOps tool called Guardrails. So you can check it out later as well. And I've also been heavily involved in actually getting the community efforts up and running. Especially here in Singapore, I started with a few others the DevSecOps Singapore meetup group. And I've brought like DevSecCon and DevOps Days as an organizer to Singapore and to Jakarta. Unfortunately, the DevSecOps meetup is not so active anymore. So if anybody wants to help reinvigorate it and rekindle it, please reach out to us as well. And I've also been the co-author for the book that Mark mentioned earlier, Epic Failures in DevSecOps. It's an interesting read where 8 or 9 different authors actually share their experiences on what went wrong in their journey so that others can avoid that mistake. Okay, let's get started. Take a look at these companies here, or these logos. Do you know all of them? Most of them? Probably use some of them on a daily basis. What do they have in common? Okay, first of all of these are Southeast Asian companies. They've been founded less than 10 years ago. They're all technology companies, and they have a valuation of over $1 billion US. So they have achieved the unicorn status. It's pretty cool, right? Southeast Asian companies within 10 years to get that kind of valuation. Let's look at this from a different angle. Who of you have heard about the 10-year challenge that Facebook used to kind of train them artificial intelligence, right? So if you look at the tech startup scene in Asia and we applied a 10-year challenge, 10 years ago it looked like this. We had Tokopedia and Garena. Now it looks something like this. And actually, this is just a list of fintech startups in Singapore and Indonesia. The list is obviously much longer. So how is this actually possible? How is it possible that so many companies now start out and actually create a very high valuation and create a lot of value for a lot of companies and a lot of customers in the region? First of all, existing solutions are no longer adequate. What does that mean? Many industries, such as finance, for example, have not been innovated in decades. That's where Tyro, for example, like Evan just mentioned, was able to disrupt something in Australia. Also, the software and services that exists provide a terrible user experience. So some of them means there's no app. Like think back to times before Grab was everywhere. How did you actually get around? How do you get a taxi? How do you get food delivered to your place? It's terrible. You have to do everything yourself, right? Another interesting fact is actually most of the Fortune 500 companies that existed back then in 1955 do not exist anymore today. So there's always this opportunity for these new changes, for these new technologies, for new providers to disrupt and become the new Fortune 500 companies. Secondly, internet enables widespread distribution. So now we don't have to go to a physical location anymore, right? When we open a bank account, when we go shopping, ideally we sit on our couch, we don't have to go anywhere, and that's great. Because this also means that for these new companies, they have customers everywhere. Not just in their market, everywhere around the world as well. And that's one of the reasons why Gojek was also able to capitalize on Indonesia so quickly, because, I mean, it's a huge country, right? How did you, like if you look at one of the biggest banks, BRI, the National Bank of Indonesia, they had to shoot up a satellite up there because they have 12,000 branches all over these islands. Now there's competition coming up that just uses the internet connection that exists already, creates a really good online banking application and disrupts these. So that's a really powerful situation for these startups. And you can also reach more people through digital marketing nowadays, and you don't have to build like the sales team. So if you look back a couple of decades, IBM, etc., they have like huge sales teams because, yeah, that's the only way you can reach people. Nowadays, you don't. You can, if you create a viral ad, you can get so many people on your platform. Thirdly, and I think also quite importantly, it's much cheaper to actually create and operate software and applications. So Edwin was just talking about open source. 85% of our applications run on open source, so it's much easier and cheaper to actually have these building blocks and create your application on top of it. Then you look at the cloud, and in the cloud you actually see that it's so easy, you don't have to create your own data center anymore. You don't have to run your own hardware. You just spin up an instance in GCP, Azure, or Amazon, and you're up and running. And actually for startups, there's a really booming ecosystem nowadays. So if you start up with an accelerator and any other company, a startup facilitator, you can get hundreds of thousands of credit in all the different clouds. So it's very cheap. You can get all of this and you can get started with just an idea and can very quickly validate this. So to summarize, the reason why so many companies nowadays actually can disrupt this, because creating new technology solutions was never easier, faster, or cheaper. Software can immediately be distributed globally, and there's a lot of old solutions or markets that are not digitized yet that provide this amazing opportunity for these companies and these entrepreneurs everywhere. Okay, so what about security in this? Why is then DevSecOps so important? If you look at it, back then, waterfall was how applications were developed, if people were actually creating applications. Before that, it was actually brick and mortar. But then we had Agile, and Agile helped us go down from months to days to develop value. So for example, again, Tyro, right? You have like every 2 weeks, you have like something that can be released, or like actually everything can be released very quickly, but you have these fixed cycles. And then DevOps came and took us from months to minutes to actually take that value that was created and ship it to production. So nowadays, applications are very mission critical for so many companies. So think of companies nowadays that don't rely on an app or a web application to actually generate a lot of revenue. There's very few. And yeah, that's why security remains unfortunately, one of the speed bumps on this journey, because, you know, it still takes 3 to 4 weeks to do a pen test. It's still, the automation part can be very difficult to get right. And this is why DevSecOps is so important. Because everything that limits this value creation and limits this value that was created to actually be put into the hands of the customers is going to cause problems for everybody. Okay, now what is the real impact of hacks and breaches? So if you look at the news, we always hear about these big brand names. The Equifax, HBO, Yahoo, Sony. But do you think this is exclusively a problem that they are facing? Probably not, right? In fact, most of the SMEs and these startups actually have most of these problems. Because if you have a big name brand, you can probably afford to like get past that breach, and you can probably afford to like deal with the impact. But actually, almost half of all the cyber attacks focus on small businesses. Actually, one out of 5 of these data breaches are the result of these web applications being breached. And more importantly, 60% of these small businesses that actually are hacked, they go out of business within 6 months. So that's a real problem, right? Because think back, if you look at the startup picture earlier, if a Grab or a Gojek or a Traveloka, if they are actually a startup, an SME, before they get big, they can actually go out of business and we lose a huge opportunity, or they do that. That's why it's important to focus on these as well. Okay, so then DevSecOps is important. We have established that. But who is actually responsible for DevSecOps? In order to understand this, we have to look at the evolution of security tools. So when it all started, that was the beginning of my career, the tools that existed were actually penetration testing tools, or things like port scanners, vulnerability scanners, things like exploitation tools. And for those of you that are very much in this industry and have used them, like 15 years ago, you have to do everything yourself. So it was still a very early stage. But the audience for the tools that did exist were very clearly security professionals. And the duration of these typical engagements was 2 to 4 weeks. Then we evolved and we entered the era of secure SDLC. So from a tool point of view, the first code security scanners came in. There were some dynamic security scanners, but we still used vulnerability scanners because, infrastructure where it's hosted, where the applications run is still very important. And so the audience started to shift as well. It was not just the security professionals, but actually it became closer to enterprise functions and organization functions, such as the enterprise security teams within an organization. They were starting to integrate these tools into the lifecycle. And then the benefit was that the 2 to 4 weeks actually started going down to 1 to 2 weeks. And then we got into the area of DevSecOps. We still have the code security scanners. We now have new things like interactive security scanners, runtime application self-protection. But interestingly, or most importantly, the audience has changed. Now the audience is starting to become developers in product teams and people inside these product teams. They have to make use for this. They're the ones that are actually responsible and becoming accountable as well. And most importantly, the tools have to provide almost real-time value and continuous value as well. Because there's no time. Nobody can wait nowadays for 2 weeks for a tool or some team to give you feedback. It has to be instantaneously. Now, if you look at the tools, now we also have to look at the teams that actually operate. So it all used to be that the security team in the area of pen testing was always the department of no. Can we do this? No. Is this secure? No. It's just like nobody wanted to talk to them because, the answer was clear before you even go there. And if you look at the skill sets in these teams, it was very, very much focused on security, development, operations was not existent. So then it changed and became in the era of secure SDLC, where the skill set of the teams were like, okay, still very much focused on security, but now it started to be more focused also on the development side of things. Because if you don't understand how developers create applications, how can you actually work with them? So the security team started to adopt this mindset of, hey, let's work together, let's figure this out. And finally, again, in the DevSecOps era, you need to find people, or you will find people in the teams that actually have a mixture of security, development, and operation skills, because they need to be kind of the bridge between these different departments. They have to understand exactly what it takes to get an idea from somebody's head into production and value to customers, and how they can support the journey. And so their mindset is now not just let's work together, but like, hey, how can we actually help you succeed? Because if you succeed, the business succeeds. Okay, so if you look at Dev, Ops, and Sec, there's a very interesting ratio, and you may have seen this before. For every 100 developers, there's 10 operation guys or people and 1 security person. So, looks like we have a scale problem. Do you think security people can be responsible and accountable for the work of 10 and 100 times the amount of people that exist that actually create the software? I mean, they're all just people, right? All humans. If it's possible, wow, great, but I don't think it is. So, modern security teams can only empower development teams. Same way as the operations folks can empower developers to make sure that all of these changes go through the pipeline as quickly as possible. Now, if you look at Amazon, and obviously everybody knows about Amazon, their CTO very famously said, you build it, you run it. Because he started to see the same problem. There's way more developers than there are operations people. So you can't just take a software increment or a feature, okay, we are done, we tested it, should work, pass it over to the operations team and say, okay, make it work. Because obviously, then all of this friction happens, which is similar to the friction we're seeing now with security, ops, and development teams. So now, this is encapsulating the spirit of DevOps. You build it, you run it. For security, you may know John Willis. He was actually here at RSAC a few years ago as well. He said, okay, you don't just build it, you don't just run it, you also have to secure it. Which makes sense, right? How can you, let's say you're joining like as a security consultant in a development team. They've built the application, it's beautiful, it's a lot of open source software, including lots of interesting features. And then one person comes and says, okay, you can't do that. They don't even understand what's going on, right? So the only way that this can actually work is by these teams working together and making sure that, hey, you have to be responsible for building it, running it, and securing it. And there's people in our organization that can help you make that happen. So that's where it's important to differentiate between responsibility and accountability. Because if somebody says, everybody's responsible, who is really responsible? No one. So that's why it's important that the product teams have to be accountable for the full outcome of what they create in the greater context of the business. That means the good, the bad, and the ugly. This means that some business decisions may be able to overturn some security decisions. But that's the only way it works, because if the buck stops with the security department, it's very, very easy to just say, sorry guys, I'm not security, it's their fault. So that's very important. This kind of mindset shift is really required to make it work properly. So now let's look at how we could leverage these DevSecOps principles. In order to do that, we first have to understand what kind of benefits security controls can bring you in an organization in these different stages of value creation. So we differentiate between create, test, and monitor. So very simple buckets. Create, simply put, is developers writing code. So an idea is created, a business features, a business case is developed, somebody creates code, and then it goes to the next phase, which is testing. We're talking about pipelines here, CI/CD, where automated test suites, and maybe sometimes even manual testing comes into the picture to review if these code changes were actually done properly. Edwin talked about that as well. And then the last stage is actually monitoring, because this was often overlooked. Somebody creates a piece of software, somebody runs some tests against it, somebody deploys it into production, and then we're good to go, right? Actually not, because this is actually where we see most of the incidents. We have to check not just if our users and our customers can use it properly, but we also have to check whether everything is within the parameters that make sense. So security has to encapsulate all of this. And if you look at these different phases here, there's challenges that we always face in there. And actually, many times when you talk about DevOps, everybody talks about shifting left. Shifting left is a good thing, but I want to say you want to start on the right before you start shifting left. And here's why. When you are in the creation phase, the challenges are that you're actually dealing with humans. And all of you have dealt with humans, because we are all humans, and it's the most difficult part to actually get right. because you have to change human behavior from how we develop software to how we develop software securely. It's very difficult to enforce because no matter how much awareness training and training you give to your teams, how do you guarantee that they now actually follow that? You can't, right? You may get a compliance check mark, but you can't actually enforce that behavior. And what happens if people churn, right? You always get new people and you're always growing, people go out. So how do you actually maintain that level? Very, very difficult. But if you manage to do it right, the benefits are you reduce new vulnerabilities from being introduced into your application. In the testing phase, the problem is, and all of you that have actually worked with it, is the vulnerability noise. All the tools that exist, they give you a lot of results. Like the first scan, again, that Edwin just mentioned, I don't know, thousands of vulnerabilities across 63 applications. Where do you begin? Some of them are irrelevant, some of them are maybe very relevant. So how do you deal with this properly? Also, these tests only identify issues. They don't actually fix them. So now you just know how bad things are, but you can't actually just say, okay, now let's fix it, we're done, right? No. So you're just getting aware now. And another issue is that not all the issues that exist in the applications can actually be identified through tools. So you still need this human touch because actually 50% of all issues that exist can be identified by tools. The other 50% you need, at least until now, humans to actually test for it. The benefits though are you can actually enforce it. Because if you're sitting in a pipeline, it can run with every commit that exists, and you get some really valuable metrics that you can then use to actually enforce other things or train. Similar to what, again, Edwin has done. So he has done a lot of these things in practice at Tyro. And to me, the most important part is actually the monitoring one. The only challenges I see is, again, some of the things that it can identify, but not everything can be identified. However, the benefits are that it's fully enforceable. You get not only metrics, but some of the attacks in that phase you can automatically block. So think of it this way. Instead of actually hoping that developers don't introduce issues, some of the results, some of the attacks that actually are happening in production could be prevented automatically across your portfolio. And I think that's a very, very important point to get across. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So when we look at the monitoring phase, the one on the right where we should start, there's a few technologies that you can adopt. There's some that are fairly new, like microsegmentation, which is, think firewalls on every single system that exists, being leveraged and orchestrated to not just give you like firewalling between zones, but actually between systems, even between containers running in your cluster, for example. So it's very powerful because it gives you a lot of metrics and can actually help successful attacks from spreading to the rest of your network. Another one is runtime application self-protection, or some also call it NGWAF, next generation web application firewall, that actually sits on your systems and identifies that there's a certain attack coming in and blocks it. And gives you the details that this kind of IP or this kind of attack just tried to happen. And I think another important part is actually leveraging the crowd. So when we talked about pen testing or other things, the problem was that it takes a lot of time. But with bug bounties, you can actually get hundreds of people around the world to continuously test your systems and your applications for vulnerabilities. The benefit is, you only pay for the actual findings, and they cover like the whole portfolio. They're like hackers for hire, but instead of exploiting you, they give you the results, how to fix it, and these are typically some of the issues the tools cannot identify. So there's 3 questions that you should ask yourself to know that you're doing this right, or that you should be able to answer. First is, are your applications currently under attack? If you can say with confidence that yes or no is true, you're in a pretty good spot. Secondly, what are your crown jewels? Can you say what attackers actually go after? Is it your user data? Is it they want to turn you into a Bitcoin mining bot, like a zombie network or something? It's just important to understand that. And are we automatically defending against this attack? 3 very simple questions, but implementing them in reality, maybe not as easy. But if you get these done, your risk reduces dramatically, and you'll be able to sleep much better at night. Now, if you look at the testing phase, there's a lot of technologies available. And this is by far the oldest part of the testing routine, where I'm not even going to go into details. You have static testing, you have tools that look for secrets in your code base, you have software composition analysis that looks at the open source libraries and the vulnerabilities, you have dynamic security scanning, and you have interactive application security testing. And now, there's again 3 questions that you can ask yourself, and hopefully you have the answers for them. First, do the latest changes, code changes, actually introduce new vulnerabilities? Second, do any of our third-party libraries have known security issues? And third, does our code contain hard-coded secrets? And hard-coded secrets is something that's becoming more and more relevant in the age of DevOps, because now everything is orchestrated, automated, so these keys can completely mean that attackers can change your whole architecture, your whole application, or just bring you down like this. And it's very important that the code is not containing these. Again, fortunately, for these 3 questions, the answers are a little bit more, a little bit easier to get, and there's tools, both open source and commercial, out there that allow you to answer them continuously as well. And finally, the DevSecOps, the create phase. Here, there's not really technologies that we can use, but there's some options that we can use in order to improve the posture and the maturity of our development teams. One is like security awareness. Very clear. Everybody heard about it. There's things like secure coding training that's becoming more and more popular. There's solutions like Secure Code Warrior out there that actually gamifies that, and that is quite popular with developers, for example. Leveraging shared knowledge bases, having security-focused hackathons, and some other options that you have. And I think the 3 questions that are very important to answer here are these. Do you have confidence that your development teams know not just the OWASP top 10 or the most common vulnerabilities, but actually the vulnerabilities that affect your portfolio, your applications, that attackers are actually exploiting or trying to exploit? Yes or no? Second, do they actually know how to detect and prevent them? And third, do we have a dedicated security contact for each of these product teams? If you can get these 9 questions answered for your organization, you're doing very, very well. Okay, let's conclude. On the technology side of things, clearly the state is the tools have improved dramatically. But you have to choose them wisely, because ideally you focus on using a technology or a solution that solves a technology problem. Because solving the human problem is a very difficult task to undertake. And also look for solutions that allow you to cover the whole portfolio. So again, Edwin, sorry, I'm using you for references the whole time. But for example, a solution was really built for Java. But now the challenge is that other technologies are coming up. So make sure that you choose something that allows you to cover your whole portfolio, ideally from day one. And also leverage the data you're getting from production, because there's so many security concerns out there. You can't address all of them right away. However, if you know what attackers are after, and if you know that some of the tools that you use can actually already fix or prevent some of these issues, you can start focusing on things that you actually should be focusing on, and that's very important. The security team has to become the department of yes. We are here to make all the other product teams succeed, no matter what. And we know that that the security team resources are very scarce, so there's only a few people out there. So we have to be very smart in how we can empower the product teams. And finally, the product teams, knowledge is power. We have to turn developers into security champions. And it's very much important that the teams are accountable to build it, run it, and secure it. And we have to be mindful that these changes in the culture always take a little bit of time. So, DevSecOps, do we really need it now? I mean, we have so many other things to do, right? Is now a good time to start? Well, there's some really compelling statistics for that. First of all, it's 30 times cheaper to fix security defects in a development stage versus when they are already in production. An average data breach can cost an organization close to $5 million US. And all the other DevOps high performers actually include security in the delivery process. So these seem like very compelling reasons, right? But I would say there's one more that's more important. Security is a competitive advantage. Nowadays, how do you do business? How do you use these technology companies? You bring out your phone, you start using it. If you don't like it, you uninstall it and just install a new app. So, you know, the customer loyalty is not really that important anymore, because nowadays, if the price is cheaper, I'm going to go with the GoCheck version instead of Grab. If, I don't know, if the experience of the tool is better, I'm going to go with the other one. And security is just one of these aspects that will start becoming more and more important, because you can't bolt security onto your product, right? But if you start getting hacked from others, then maybe you will lose a lot of customers, because it's so easy nowadays to go from one app to the other without skipping a beat. And that's why security is a competitive advantage, and I think that's why we should really start now. Thank you.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
Yeah, no problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place, you know?
Wow.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Now it's time for our news. It's Monday, and as I said in the beginning of the show, if you've watched the show before, you kind of know the cadence and what we do. If you haven't, we try to spotlight every day a different news story, different stories across our 3 websites. And they're not meant to be exhaustive. They're really just pointing out a couple articles to look at. But, you know, feel free to go to all 3 sites, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps.com, and check it out. First on Security Boulevard, we have the dramatically changing role of the CISO. And you know what? For a fairly new role, it is dramatically changing. It's constantly evolving, and there's it's good and bad. But take a look at the article. Interested in what you would think on that. Next on Security Boulevard, in the new normal, digital transformation accelerates for industrial networks. So I've seen articles on both sides of this question, which is COVID delaying or accelerating digital transformation? I firmly am in the accelerating camp. And I think this article takes that tack to it. Have a look. It's a good article. Over on Container Journal, we have the case for Kubernetes, why enterprises should embrace Kubernetes with open arms. And again, we're seeing our arguments on both sides of this one. I think progress stops for no man or virus, and there's no stopping Kubernetes. But take a look at the article. Tell us what you think. And then we have one, Snapt, S-N-A-P-T, brings ADC to Kubernetes. Again, just filling in, rounding out, tucking in the full feature set for Kubernetes. Over on DevOps.com, we have how to secure the intangible, cloud-native security in the new age. It's a hot topic, this cloud-native security stuff. Bunch of companies chasing it. Take a look at the article. I think you'll enjoy it. And then we have working with SAFE, right? That's S-A-F small e and microservices. And SAFE, of course, is part of the Agile. Article addresses three key questions for developers should ask themselves to ensure they maximize on and also grow their own skill set while on the job. And, the whole upskilling thing is an important thing in today's world. So like I said, not meant to be exhaustive, but some good articles there to read. Check it out. And there's a lot more there if you want articles that we didn't have a chance to mention here. DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard. Alrighty. Now, let's head over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has some great interviews for us today. Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Michael, who's director of product management at VMware, and we're going to talk about the latest version of Harbor 2.0. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know that the latest version of Harbor was just released, and I am wondering if you could tell me, first of all, what is really significant about this release? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Harbor 2.0 was one of our largest endeavors to date. It kind of revolutionized how we look at image management and the types of artifacts that we host and serve in Harbor. For the first time ever, Harbor is now able to host OCI images. In the past, we hosted container images and home charts, and that was great. That's pretty much 95% of the assets that cloud native developers needed up to that date. But moving forward, that's just really not enough. There's this new specification around OCI conformance, and OCI stands for Open Container Initiative, that basically creates a blueprint for what are the types of images that are supported? What kind of runtimes can support those images? How can you distribute those images? So it's kind of bringing everything together into a standards body that is open to everybody, and it kind of creates a common ground and a common way to describe things, to host images, and to serve them. So now Harbor, with the 2.0 release, we've actually went away from only hosting container images and home charts to encompass the full OCI data type. So any file or artifact in the cloud native space that's OCI compliant can be hosted on Harbor now. So that means home charts, you don't have to host them using Chart Museum anymore. You can host them using OCI. Container images, OPAs, Singularity, CNAP bundles. Now we actually give you the ability to, if you have an OCI file and you want to register it like Harbor to both host it as well as be able to serve the content, you have that. But that's not just it. That's kind of where we're starting. The true power of Harbor comes from its policy engine, the ability to scan images for vulnerabilities and give that peace of mind to end users and to operators and network administrators that any image that I deploy in a Kubernetes cluster is free from vulnerabilities. That's kind of a statement that if you're using Harbor, you can make, because we can scan your images using popular scanners like Trivi from Aqua Security or Anchor, Enterprise or Engine, or even Claire from CoreOS, and they get to go to the different national vulnerability databases. They figure out what vulnerabilities are applicable to your image, whether that's to the operating system or to the package manager. They crack it open, they identify that, and then they give back Harbor a result. And using our policy, Harbor can allow you to define a policy that says, hey, if an image has a medium severity vulnerability or higher, never allow a developer to push it to production. Never allow a developer to push it to a Kubernetes cluster. That's critical. As a security operator, that's the type of policy you want to be able to sleep better at night. Then we don't really stop at vulnerability scanning. Harbor has a lot of other policy like quota management. Don't allow a developer to run away and consume like 5 terabytes of storage in a project. We have retention policies. For compliance reasons, you might say, I cannot legally store more than a year's worth of images into my repository in Harbor. I want you to purge the older ones because developers should be using the new versions of those images anyway. You could create things like immutability. And immutability is kind of a cool new thing these days, because if you define a version of your application, let's call it the Nginx version 2.3, if you define that immutable, it means that nobody, whether they're a good user or a malicious user, can come in and override that version in Harbor. They can create a new version, but they cannot override the existing one. So when you're basically releasing your production GA quality applications into Harbor, you can tag them as immutable right away to make sure that nobody ever messes with that image and nobody can update it. And that's again, this is more from a compliance, security, peace of mind type of policies. We have webhooks that now can apply to OCI images and many more. So, I mean, I think of Harbor as kind of two things. It can store and serve artifacts, but it's a policy engine, and that's where the true power of Harbor shines.
Well, it sounds like it's jam-packed for a 2.0 release. That's pretty
absolutely
stuff. Yeah. So just for a little bit of background, it is a container registry, and it was created originally by VMware, right? But the CNCF has it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started Harbor out of a need at VMware to have a registry that's packaged, that you get to deploy in your own infrastructure and has not only the ability to store and serve content, but be able to customize it to the individual needs of an organization. And more importantly, be able to be plug and play with additional investments you have. Investments in CI/CD, investments in automation, investments in Kubernetes, for example. So that's why we came up with Harbor. Then Harbor was donated to the CNCF in the summer of 2018 at sandbox level. It got promoted to incubation in November of 2018, and we've been in incubation since. Actually, now Harbor is in the last stage of graduation in CNCF, and we have entered what is called the public voting period, where the public can vote with confidence or issue any concerns around Harbor, and then eventually the Technical Oversight Committee of the CNCF will vote on Harbor graduation at the end of May.
All right.
And that's when we know, did you graduate or not? It could potentially become the 11th project to graduate in CNCF. Fingers crossed, potentially.
That's great. Yeah, fingers crossed for sure. So, one thing I've been wondering about is just kind of the adoption of registries in general. Do you think that the registries are becoming more popular as more companies are adopting containers, and what is it about them that you think makes them so attractive?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, with the proliferation of cloud-native applications and more enterprises and users are moving towards containers and this modern way of, it's not just containers, it's this modern way of delivering software, right? It's a modern software delivery pipeline. But you can't have Kubernetes without a registry. You have to host your images somewhere. They have to come from somewhere. So a lot of users are looking for alignment between their investments in the runtime, which is Kubernetes in this case, and that's their orchestrator of choice. Mm-hmm. And they need a registry that also aligns with that, like aligns both from a functionality standpoint, from a security standpoint, aligns with what is deployed. Like if you're at the edge or in a branch office, you don't want your registry to be up there in the public cloud. Then you're dealing with network latency, you're dealing with network packet loss, and other issues that really, you can't really run a business that way. You want your registry to be co-located and near your clusters. If you're a developer and you're developing apps, you need a place to push those apps. And so you need a registry that's locally accessible to you so that you don't lose time. So there's a lot of reasons why a registry goes very well in line with cloud native and specifically with Kubernetes.
Cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I am excited about Harbor 2.0, and I'm really interested in seeing how the whole population at large, if you will, of container users votes to adopt it or not. So, but I have a feeling it's going to be very well received in the marketplace.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for kind of walking me through Harbor, and look forward to the next iteration and see what you guys have coming down the pike for the next 6 months to a year or so.
Absolutely, we have a jam-packed roadmap, and we're always looking for more users, more adopters, more folks to come and help us deliver Harbor and write in some features. So if anybody's interested, come in. We're a welcoming community, and we have an exciting roadmap.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thanks again for your time. I really do appreciate it. Love to hear the insights. Love to hear about all the new technologies. So thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, stick around. We've got lots more coming up on TechStrong TV, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All righty. Thanks, Charlene, very much. That was great. Now it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, our CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, has some great conversations for you today. Mitchell, take it away.
Well, welcome to a new week. We, of course, have a new flash poll we would like to share with you. You can take this poll by going to devops.com, and in the lower right-hand corner, the poll will pop up. And, of course, you can provide your anonymous answers and see the results right away. So they're a lot of fun to do. Hope you'll take it. Again, we're focusing on software delivery management as one of our areas of research we have ongoing right now. And this question is directly around the issue of, we have these great tool chains that help us create software. What kind of visibility does it give us, not just us the developers or us the QA operations security function, but what about all the stakeholders about where we are in the process? The question specifically is, do you have good quality data from across the tool chain to accurately report on development progress and release timing so all stakeholders are prepared? Of course, the answers are very high quality, very low quality, kind of all the places in between. Really interesting question, because it's great to focus on tools that help us create software. There's a lot of super valuable data that are created during the software creation process by those tools, and can be extremely valuable in informing the organization about our development progress, creation of software, delivery of that software, and helping organizations understand where we are. And I'm sure there are organizations who are just happy to have that tool chain in place. The products or technologies or open source, whatever it is, all working together. And then, okay, now let's look at data. Others may be farther along and have leveraged some of that. So we'll see what the results are. Now, that question is actually the same question that we're asking on our broader survey. It takes about 7 minutes to complete around software delivery management. So if you would take that, you can get to the survey at acceleratedsurvey.com. And we'd love to have your input, love to have your views on those questions. And of course, the results from that, just like this poll, while it won't be available instantaneously, the report, all the data that we're collecting, the insights that we gain, those are things that we will share with you for free, because that's our model. Knowledge wants to be free with Accelerated Strategies. So let's turn our attention to a topic I don't believe I've talked about on Analyst Corner, and that's around mainframe technology. Now, you might want to say, well, why did that come up? I'm actually doing a webinar later this week, I think it's on Wednesday, around the economic recovery, DevOps, and the role of mainframes, actually the critical role of mainframes. Now, I started my career, as you can tell, I don't think there's anything but gray hairs left anymore, but I started my career early on, writing software on personal computers, but also in the mainframe environment in the financial world and telecom industries, and then shifted out into client server and a bunch of other things, eventually getting to cloud and mobile apps and things like that, that are, things that we do today as well. But, one of the things along the progression my career, I've developed this belief that technology that we implement in IT, the technology never goes away. Whatever decisions we make of the technology to use, very rarely at some point does that get pulled out, unless it's just through an acquisition and we're going to retire these systems and go with these. But even in those cases, many of those may be in products that you help create, and some of it sticks around anyway. So it's pretty consequential, some of the technology decisions that we make. Matter of fact, most of them. Mainframes are a good example. They're still here today. We may not talk about them a lot, but there's a vibrant community in the DevOps community. I know on DevOps.com, webinars that we do on mainframe subjects always get great attendance. What I'm impressed about in the mainframe community, and we call it Big Iron, when we used to call that when I was working in mainframes, is that there's a resurgence of interest of keeping innovation going in mainframes. And I'm not saying there hasn't been innovation; it certainly has, but also about how it applies to a DevOps environment, how it applies to a tool chain, essentially for involving mainframe applications and development tools. And people are doing that today. Matter of fact, they don't write software. We used to call it coding. They don't code on mainframe terminals in the same way, or maybe some do, but most folks have pulled that out into laptops and desktop computers, but they're using tools outside of that environment for source code management, for automated testing, for integration in a mainframe environment. Now, keep in mind, most of those mainframe environments don't operate standalone. They're talking to data sources outside of that environment, applications, and very much the other way around, because in telecommunications, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services, there's a wealth of data that is processed through mainframe technologies and applications. So thinking about our economic recovery, thinking about organizations as they're transforming through our current economic crisis, adjusting their strategies, maybe a little, maybe a lot, I suspect mainframe technologies will still be a vital part of where organizations are heading if you have mainframe technology in your environment. So I invite you to tune in. You can find out about the webinar on the DevOps.com site. And I'd love to have you join us there. But also think about that as you're putting together your strategy or making adjustments. Remember, there's a lot of technology stacks that you may not work with every day, but they're part of that environment that you're bringing with you. And you may be able to sunset some things once in a while, but there's an awful lot of things that decisions that have been made, technologies that have been put in place in the past, if you're an organization that's been around for a few years, that you'll be bringing with you. And where might you consider revitalizing or investing more in for innovation? It doesn't take a lot of money to kind of bring folks into the modern world of how we create software today, given whatever technologies on the back end that we're using. So that's what's so interesting about our industry is it's not just one thing or one way of doing it or one technology stack. It's so many variations of that, whether you're talking about real-time applications, mobile applications, the large financial transaction processing, whatever it is, cloud. It's just a lot of fun, great things to work with. So it's a short week. Or as we used to call it, a short week when it's Memorial Day coming up. I don't know if everybody's hopping in their cars and going somewhere this upcoming weekend. Probably not. Maybe you're headed out, venturing out a little bit in the times of lifting the work-at-home requirements of your local community or state. I just hope that everything is safe for you, and we all continue to practice social distancing, wear masks, all those things to try to help each other. Someone said, I wear a mask not for me, but I wear that for you. And that is actually true. And something that we can do to help minimize or slow the spread of coronavirus, in addition to sheltering at home. When we're not doing that, being out amongst each other continue to practice that social distancing and wearing a mask. I certainly do. Well, have a good week, and we'll be talking again soon. Be well, be safe, and be careful out there.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hello, I'm Mark Hornbeek. Welcome to the third tutorial in the Engineering DevOps series. I am CEO and Principal Consultant of Engineering DevOps Consulting, an analyst for the Accelerated Strategies Group, an ambassador and course author for the DevOps Institute, a blogger on DevOps.com, and I'm author of the book that you see here called Engineering DevOps. My website is www.engineeringdevops.com. So let's get started. Why is engineering DevOps important? The material in this book is also available in a white paper on my website. You can see on the left, why is engineering DevOps important? The agenda is to cover that, as well as the myths and truths that are pertinent to why it is important to understand engineering DevOps and to practice engineering when doing DevOps. How do you know you have engineering DevOps is an important question. How do you know you've accomplished it? What are the benefits of engineering DevOps when it's engineered well? And what are the consequences if you have poorly engineered your DevOps implementation? And a summary. So let's get into it. First of all, why is engineering DevOps important? It's all about business outcomes. There's no question that DevOps or anything else has limited value if there isn't some value to the overall business, and engineering DevOps has to do with that, and we'll be talking in detail about why that's true. But generally speaking, DevOps transformations have been known to regularly fail. In other words, they don't accomplish their goals if you do not follow a disciplined engineering DevOps practice or approach, or you may yield some limited benefits with some trade-offs. For example, speed versus quality benefits, or security at the expense of satisfaction, or stability at the expense of efficiency. So there's various trade-offs that other methodologies have accomplished, but engineering DevOps, when engineered properly, provides a practical, disciplined, step-by-step engineering approach to achieve comprehensive improvements without the trade-offs. That's really the whole point of why engineering DevOps is important, and we'll go into that in more detail. There are some myths and associated truths that I would like to lay bare, because these are important to understanding the value of engineering DevOps. First of all, it's generally said DevOps is a cultural movement. Certainly, DevOps has a lot to do with culture, but the truth is, to accomplish DevOps requires engineering principles and practices to really accomplish it well and consistently. There's another myth, DevOps requires continuous deployments. Well, that's certainly DevOps, but delivering releases without deployments to production also offers benefits, and often that is the case. Your deployment cadence may be less than your actually delivery cadence, so that you can at least validate deliverables and make sure that internally everything is working well before deployments. Another myth, DevOps applies to any software product, service, or application. Well, in some ways it does, but the truth is there are lots of cases where you do not warrant investment in DevOps. There is an investment required in people, process, and technology changes. So there are some guidelines and checklists that I have associated with helping you define whether or not your application is a good candidate for DevOps investment. Just as one example is, if an application doesn't change very often, you probably don't need to invest in DevOps. Another myth, DevOps requires Agile. Well, it certainly complements Agile. DevOps emphasizes more of an end-to-end process optimization, where Agile often focuses more on the front end of the pipeline or value stream. But both do complement each other. Does it require it? Not really, but it certainly helps. There's another myth. The scope of DevOps is the same as the CI/CD pipeline. This could be this is quite untrue. I mean, DevOps extends well into planning and operations and beyond the pipeline and covers things other than the tool chain and the pipeline. All of these things need to be engineered, not just the pipeline. Another myth is DevOps does not apply to platform products such as software code embedded in manufactured products. Well, that's certainly not true. I spent much of my career in that industry of manufacturing and applied DevOps regularly, all the principles, practices, and engineering. So how do you know when you've accomplished DevOps? If you go back to Gene Kim's book, the Phoenix Project, he talks about the 3 ways. So it's good to try to relate those 3 ways to something specific that you could measure. The first way of DevOps, called continuous flow. You can know you've got it, if you like, when you have flow existing from planning through to operations. The outcomes are deterministic and repeatable. Each stage has a measurable exit and entry criteria. And generally speaking, automation is employed through most of the stages to prevent serious bottlenecks. So that to me is a good way to determine whether you have continuous flow. The second way of DevOps, continuous feedback, is building on top of the first way. So all of the prior things apply, but in addition, you have metrics directing application release decisions, and you have tools aggregating metrics, log data, and producing reactive analysis that are consistently used. The third way of DevOps, continuous improvement, is accomplished, which is sort of an oxymoron in some ways because continuous improvement, you're never really finished. But generally speaking, you've already achieved the first way, the second way, and now you're doing regularly retrospectives, identifying improvements, have a culture of doing that. Metrics are proactively analyzed to identify improvements, and experiments are frequently conducted to seek and find new solutions and improvements to the DevOps system itself. So those are ways that you can determine where are you in against the 3 ways and whether or not you've engineered DevOps consistently to meet the goals of at least one of those 3 ways. So what are the benefits? The State of the DevOps report is a great report, and it talks about essentially 6 categories of benefits which apply to well-engineered DevOps. The holy grail of DevOps, if you like, is to get all of these 6 benefits simultaneously and make those improvements. So we'll talk about that. The benefit categories are agility, stability, efficiency, quality, security, and satisfaction. So many methodologies, like I said, have been able to make improvements to 1 or 2 of these, but often they're at the sacrifice of others. So with DevOps, when it's engineered well, you get all of them simultaneously. Okay, so let's talk about agility for the moment. Agility really examples of benefits include reducing the lead time from, let's say, code check-in to deliveries being available for deployment. There's different ways to measure it, and certainly different organizations measure it differently. You can also talk about the frequency of producing deployable releases, or the percent of time employees spend on new work versus rework or other work. You generally work with small batch increments rather than large sections or modules. Workflow is visible throughout the pipeline. There's another key benefit with agility. You want to be able to see what's going on with all the different components. The State of the DevOps report, the one I happen to like was the 2016 report, which I think the data still applies from my experience. It shows that 200 times more frequent deployments are accomplished with DevOps when engineered properly, and over 2,500, 2,555 times shorter lead times. That's kind of an exact number, but generally speaking, it's true that shorter lead times are a key benefit under the category of agility. Stability. So this has to do with maintaining an operational state of your system, your deployed system, despite disturbances. A focus on mean time to recover or mean time to restore from failure or service outages in production is a key benefit. Having a low percent of code merges from deployment breaking the trunk branch is a key benefit. The State of the DevOps report talks about quantified benefits: 24 times faster recovery from failures, 3 times lower change failure rates than low-performing organizations. So these are measurable benefits that well-engineered DevOps systems accomplish. Efficiency. This is about the ratio of useful output to total input produced for release. And The time employees spend on unplanned work and rework is another factor. Metrics for capital costs of development and operations, as well as non-capital costs for development and operations. There are metrics, and you keep track of those in a well-engineered DevOps environment to measure your efficiency. And in general, lean product management practices are practiced and very visible. So the State of the DevOps report talked about 22% less time spent on unplanned work and 29% more time on new work in well-engineered DevOps environments. Quality. Generally speaking, DevOps delivers fewer deficiencies, and significant variations that cause failures are taken care of. Frequency of failures that require immediate remediation is improved, and tests and test data are sufficient and available when needed. And organizations regularly seek and act on customer feedback. So these are some of the characteristics of well-engineered DevOps related to quality. Security. So security has to do with managing risks as it relates to processing and storage, transmission of data. In this case, the benefits occur in the context of fewer number of serious business affecting security events, fewer user accessing unauthorized information, and the time that employees spend on remediating security issues should be less if you're accomplishing a well-engineered DevOps environment. The State of the DevOps report indicated that well-engineered environments spend 50% less time on remediating security issues. Finally, satisfaction in a well-engineered environment. Employees generally feel good about their working environment. They recommend their teams as a great place to work. They recommend their organizations as a great place to work. And the culture is generally practicing good communication flow in a cooperative and trusting culture and spirit. And generally, leaders promote personal and team recognition in well-engineered DevOps environments. So altogether, there's a lot of benefits. What happens if you don't engineer DevOps well? There are a lot of cases out there that you can point to. The one I happen to find startling and interesting is the case of Knight Capital. There's a an article that's entitled 45 Minutes of Hell. It was published in April 2014. The basic idea was that one bad deployment caused the trading system to have 4 million invalid transactions within 45 minutes. There was no cutoff switch built into the software. They lost $460 million in 45 minutes, which basically bankrupted the company. There were a lot of potential lessons learned here, but a lot of them have to do with DevOps related things that had they had a well-engineered DevOps could have been avoided. Things such as having good version management, having good rollout and roll forward processes in place, putting circuit breakers in the code and their deployment processes, automating the deployments, and not only the installation but also recovery procedures, having tested deployment process before they're used, instrument the apps and processes with monitoring tools, make sure all the key stakeholders have visibility during deployment, and of course training the staff. So these are all just examples. That's a big example, I guess, of poorly engineered DevOps and consequences of not engineering DevOps well. So basically, that's the tutorial for today. Why is engineering DevOps important? In a nutshell, DevOps, when engineered according to best practices, yields dramatically improved business outcomes, including time to market, efficiency, stability, quality, security, and satisfaction, compared to alternatives of not using them. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more, as I mentioned, you can go to the website and download a copy of the white paper under engineeringdevops.com/documents, or you can send me an email at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com, or get a copy of my book on mybook.to/engineeringdevops. Thank you again for listening. Looking forward to seeing you in the next course of this series.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, it's Monday. It's time to check in on our channel roundup session that our friend Mike Vizard is nice enough to host for us. And Mike, again, has his sidekick with him, Frank Olhurst. So here's Mike Vizard and Frank Olhurst on the channel roundup.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, thanks, Alan, and good to see you again, Frank. How you doing?
Good. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well. But I wonder if the channel partners are doing as well. Red Hat announced that it is aligning with AWS to deliver a fully managed Kubernetes service on Red Hat OpenShift. Parts of it will be managed by AWS, and Red Hat will manage the rest of it, Red Hat being, of course, a unit of IBM. Do you think that there's going to be room for partners if the vendors are delivering these quote-unquote fully managed services?
I think they're looking to squeeze partners out, to tell you the truth, especially when you have occurrences of such strange bedfellows coming together to come up with the service.
And for the partner, I guess the only place to go is at the application layer. They're going to have to be up at layer 7, or can they launch their own Kubernetes-based service or whatever other kind of service it's going to be and just manage that stack themselves?
I would say that would be something to look into. I mean, they also have the opportunity to manage the connectivity as well and the security around that connectivity. So, I mean, not all is lost. It's just that potentially where the largest profits can be made is lost.
Do you think that the price of these services will then drop through the floor because the vendors are providing them? Is there going to be some squeeze on the margin side of this equation too?
I think we're going to start seeing these services approach commodity status, especially when you've got these large vendors getting involved, you know. Red Hat and AWS and their associated ownership and other companies aren't the only folks playing this game. I'm sure we're going to see other large-scale vendors coming to market with their own direct service delivery mechanisms.
And I also wonder, do we really need, if you're a partner, AWS, Google, or Microsoft for that matter, or can you deliver a cloud service cost effectively using white label components and the end customer doesn't really care who delivers it. It's just from the cloud.
Potentially. I mean, look at it this way. There's a whole lot of mid-tier cloud provisioning companies out there, that have data centers that do, hosting and do things like that. And I don't think it would be too much of a stretch for the partners out there to look to those folks to create new partnerships, to take on these titans that are trying to steal business from them.
Yeah, if you look at the margins of the cloud service providers, it looks like they're doing very well. So that would suggest that there was some room inside there for the partner to kind of build something that might be a little more cost effective and a little more attractive from a pricing perspective.
And also from the point of view of establishing a better relationship and having an understanding of the customer's business. When you have these large vendors getting involved, they paint with a very wide brush. I mean, you look at it from the point of view of even something like Salesforce, which relies on a healthy ecosystem to turn their core product into something that's custom or usable by a lot of the mid-market businesses. And perhaps that's where the partners can come into play as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the customers that I talk to are not exactly big fans of the AWS customer support model, which basically is, send us an email and we'll get back to you.
Right, along with your credit card number.
All right, elsewhere, there are some interesting things going on in the land of networking. Microsoft has acquired Metaswitch, which provides a quote-unquote cloud-native network operating system. At the same time, Dell rolled out a instance of Sonic that it will curate. Sonic is a network operating system that's also built by Microsoft that they use within their Azure environments. And Dell, of course, is hoping that more people will use that in an on-premise world. In both cases, we're seeing the rise of what I would call a modern programmable operating system environment that you can then give the developers more control over what's happening in the network itself. And there's a lot of debate to what degree we want to give up control of the network to developers, but it looks like it's happening regardless. My question to you, though, is are we looking at some major shift happening at the network layer here, and what might be the ultimate impact to the channel partners?
Well, we've started to see shifts happening regardless of these recent acquisitions and investments in technology. Look at where how the software-defined wide area networking market has grown. Look at how other open technologies have grown as well. Look at the drive towards, network virtualization. So there's a lot of, flux going on when it comes down to it. But, when you take a look at how, Microsoft and Dell and others are kind of approaching this market, what they want to do, I think, is empower the developers to have more control, to allow them to create more customized solutions. And I'm wondering how much of the onus is being put on the developers themselves to make sure everything remains secure, and if this becomes an opportunity for the SecOps people, or is it a way to kind of shift responsibility out to different types of partners than the core vendors? Or are they looking to just build a whole new network and the way that connectivity will occur in hybrid systems? So, there's a lot of questions that should be answered here. And I think several of them are going to have to wait until we see how they actually market and push out these technologies.
Yeah, we've also seen Cisco buddy up with Google, and they are basically defining a set of APIs where the SD-WAN is going to sit up on the Google Cloud. And that's how you'll programmatically deliver networking services to your end customer in much the same way that we do today on a public cloud. It'll just be more accessible to developers and also extend it out to these hybrid cloud computing environments. I think, Cisco has seen the writing on the wall here. I think there's a lot of partners out there who are selling network switches that come bundled with software that are going to need a new business model. What do you think?
Potentially, but there's also the other concern on the flip side. Are these organizations going to be able to build kind of monopolies around connectivity? Are we going to see kind of the rise of the AT&T of the 1970s? Or are we going to see something completely different happen?
Yeah. When I look at it, a lot of the cloud service providers are positioning themselves to be over-the-top providers of services that are networking centric. And I wonder if they're lining themselves up to compete more so with the traditional carriers who will then just be delivering dumb pipe services to the cloud service providers that they in turn are monetizing.
Very true. I mean, what we'll have to look for is if, some of these large players are investing in carriers or vice versa, and see where that goes.
Right. There's more news on the acquisition front. VMware acquired Octarine. They make a service mesh for securing Kubernetes environments. Service meshes are essentially control planes that get dropped in on top of Kubernetes. And VMware is talking about having multiple service meshes now delivered through this VMware Tanzu service that they have for managing all kinds of Kubernetes distributions. Do you think VMware is in a position of strength here because they do have such a large install base and they can now extend that into these new platforms and architectures? Or is this so disruptive that, VMware is just doing a rearguard action here?
Well, I think they're going to really look to leverage that installed base. I mean, it's very easy to get the message out to those that are already using VMware solutions. The question becomes one of, where does VMware envision themselves in the future? What services are they going to be able to offer, and how are they going to be able to, build not only on the virtualization model, but also the microservices model and all these other models that are impacting the very core of their business. So I think it's something that VMware must do. But on the flip side, looking at, some of their past attempts to play in a broader market have been met with challenges, especially from the open source community. So the question becomes is how convincing can they be that they can develop this, let's call it a platform that unifies these different type of services to give equal access regardless of what you're using on that back end.
It's also interesting that you mentioned the open source crowd. So OpenStack this week delivered an update to its framework as well. And it's a little bit of irony here in that OpenStack and VMware seem to have the same problem. There's Kubernetes coming along and all these different services, and they want to position themselves as the control plane for those services. And for a lot of organizations, that makes a lot of sense. However, it seems as I look around, there's just as many organizations deploying Kubernetes without any help from VMware or the OpenStack community. And, is this going to be a permanent state of affairs, or do you think that Kubernetes might one day subsume both of these platforms?
Well, looking at it from, how the market is rapidly evolving and all of these startups out there that are starting to make a lot of noise, especially around Kubernetes, really confuses where we're going to see a lot of the established technologies go. You've got everybody shouting about that they've got the better mousetrap, that you don't need these big vendors, that you can kind of roll your own Kubernetes solution. You can devise your own management plane around it, and you can all do it in-house. But what many people do not mention or, offer in their, advice is that how complicated this can be and how well these solutions work when they don't work. That seems to be the big issue, is that when you run into unexpected challenges when you're moving over to these different type of solutions. And sometimes having that big vendor out there that has that, well of tech support might be a better way to first get involved. But, as time goes on, I see, Kubernetes becoming more ubiquitous out there, easier to work with, and tons of support from many different avenues readily becoming available, both from the open source side of the thing, open source side of the equation, and both from, vendors that you pay to help you.
One of the things that is interesting about all this is there's definitely a Kubernetes fear factor. And it stems from the fact that this platform was built for engineers by engineers. So the average IT administrator is a little intimidated. And even partners are somewhat intimidated by it, especially if they made their bones around VMware per se. And I think that a lot of the partners in that camp and a lot of the end customers in that camp are going to naturally lean into what VMware is saying or what an OpenStack provider is saying, because there's just this notion of, I don't have the skills, I don't know where to find these people, I don't have time to get trained, and right now I'm under pressure to do something innovative because it's the downturn and we got to launch some new products because otherwise the business may not be here in a year. But at the same time, they're kind of like, boy, Kubernetes is scary.
Well, they are going to take, the path of least resistance to get involved when it comes down to it. But the point in time is going to come as they're traveling down that path that they realize that, this is a very expensive way to move forward. And now that I've cut my teeth on Kubernetes, thanks to the help of, either OpenStack or VMware, I know a bit more about it. I'm more comfortable with it. Maybe now is the time to start looking into different ways that I can increase my margins and create something a little more unique. That seems to be the natural evolution when there's change in technology. Now, on the flip side, if VMware and OpenStack make it so easy for partners to get involved, that it's just not worth the investment to look anywhere else, they might be onto something.
Speaking of power and inside baseball gamemanship these days, the Linux Foundation announced this week that they were going to become an official submitter through one of their arms to these standards bodies such as ISO. There's been a lot of tension over the years between these organizations because standards bodies were dominated by vendors who created standards that were a little too loosey-goosey and too open, so the interoperability suffered. The open source community turns around and says, hey, we all work together and we vet these things and the interoperability is high. And now it looks like we're going to see a little bit of détente between these organizations. But I wonder, as we go forward, do standards bodies still matter, or is it all going to be by default some kind of de facto open source standard from here on out?
Well, I think the standards bodies lend some legitimacy to, what the vendors are trying to do. But when you look at it from where we need to move into the world of IT, and that is kind of tearing down silos. And the best way to tear down silos is to have acceptable standards that allow things to interop and work together. Now, we've dealt with decades of each of these large vendors saying that their way is the only way, and this is how you have to do things. And, forcing folks to turn to outside help to make things work together that should just work together natively. I think standards bodies help to kind of establish those relationships, but also standards bodies seem to kind of inject, inefficiency and unnecessary wait times into the process as, the members fight over the standards. So I think the open source community is in a good position to not have to worry about standards bodies, but I could see them wanting to try and play better with the established vendors just to be able to build out business.
Yeah, to your point, the market is often come and gone by the time a standards body gets around to officially blessing something. All right, one last topic here. There's a survey out from NTT that suggests that end customers will double their reliance on managed service providers in the next 18 months, and especially in the areas of cloud and security. And I know there's a lot of MSPs right now that are, scared out of their minds because they don't know what's happening in the small business market that a lot of them depend on. But do you think, at the back end of all of this, which is maybe hopefully sometime in 2021, that MSPs might emerge fewer but stronger?
I think there's a potential for that. We're seeing out there a lot of marketing and advertising being done by cable companies towards small business that, hey, we can handle your security, or we can handle your communications, or, deal with us as, your singular IT environment. And, there are a lot of businesses that are interested in pursuing that, basically from the point of view of lowering costs. Now, if we look at it from, past experiences, when cable companies or phone companies or folks like that get involved with small businesses, they tend to fail miserably. They tend to build up expectations that they cannot deliver on, and they tend to be, very difficult to deal with when it comes to support or anything custom. So I think we're going to see, growth in the managed services market. And I think we're going to see that growth being pushed by these, larger vendors that are trying to get involved with managed services. And I see that their failures are probably going to feed the partners out there who can offer managed services, and then say that, you will not encounter these all too typical problems with us that you have with, big cable companies.
So the advice is, even with big guys like cable companies and telcos, and of course, Red Hat and AWS, is if you stay close to your customer and you're still hanging out with them and you're elbow to elbow, you may be able to withstand all these incursions.
Potentially, yes.
All right. On that, as always, buddy, thanks for spending some time.
It was my pleasure, and thanks for having me on the show.
All right. And back to you, Alan.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of Media Ops here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. You know, the tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And, you know, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at Media Ops for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, you know, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, you know, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong. All righty. Back here now in the studio. Our last segment today is from our friends at Gigamon's Threat Insight team. And this is their Threat Insight podcast. It's episode 2. We played episode 1 last week, or maybe it was the week before. And we'll probably do about maybe a once a month cadence on this. But I think it's interesting, especially if you're into threat research, red team, blue team, that kind of stuff. So let's now go to our Gigamon Threat Insight videocast.
They let us do a second one. It is the second edition of the Gigamon Insight podcast. My name is Danny Akatsuki. I am the Senior Technical Account Manager with Gigamon Threat Insight. And joining me, one of my favorite people in this entire company, gave the best hug when I actually came on board, Mr. Will Peteroy, our Chief Technology Officer for Security. What's up, man?
Hey, Danny. How's it going?
Good. Timely that we're doing these podcasts now. I mentioned in the first episode that we had discussed this towards the end of December, Steven and I, about doing these, and now we're all virtual. So I figure it's a good a time as any to start sharing some knowledge. Particularly interesting for this one, entitled Business in a Bag, because we wanted to do one about working from home, because that's what like all of us are doing now pretty much. And if you're not, or if you're on hold, or if you actually have to, thankfully, like our job is remote. Like that's awesome. We're not on the front lines or anything, but not exactly cut and dry, right? It's kind of an acquired skill set to work remotely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things. So I was fortunate. I got to be one of the co-founders of Iceberg, which was acquired by Gigamon in 2018. And I remember when we were sitting down at Iceberg thinking about remote work, and honestly, our first set of remote work was a complete train wreck, in that really nobody was happy. And so we had the opportunity a couple of years after that to hire some really, really talented security researchers that were based. So main office was up in Seattle, and the security researchers were actually based down in California. And we decided to give it another go. And in that, we had a whole set of lessons learned from the first time when we messed it up. And so, yeah, I think that for us, and I mean, Danny, you got to experience and have gotten to experience that kind of like, you know, we have remote weeks. We do spend time to, like, just because everybody's remote, we do when we're not in a pandemic, try to spend a lot more time together face to face with folks and kind of, have a schedule. And yeah, anyway, I think that the second edition of working remote at Iceberg and now at Gigamon has been a really big success in my mind. We've had really good retention. People have been really happy. I think, in a lot of ways, I look at the remote team as an extended family, and that's been really cool. I think that, the challenge of these days is, it's no longer just folks that used to work remote. I used to travel like 75, 80%. So it's kind of like working remote, only you're literally working out of a bag. Like I have a GoRuck that is pretty much work for me. Everything I need for work fits in there, and I take it with me all over the place. But I think the big challenge is like now that everybody's working remote, what does that mean? And then what kind of lessons learned do we have from, being remote workers, managing remote workers? So anyway, lots of good stuff to talk about here.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the first time that you had done it. What were some of those lessons learned? Like what do you think and of course I completely glossed over in the beginning. I'm like, Will is chief CTO for security, not mentioning that Iceberg was his baby. Like he's the one that brought this to us. Like I remember hearing about Iceberg years ago and people trying to get me to come there. And I was like, oh no, I don't know about it. And I regret every single day that I did not come. So I completely glossed over that. So my apologies for that. But as somebody in the executive suite, somebody making those big business decisions, what did you see that was maybe a weak point? And this is going to be, a good lesson maybe for those people that are watching that are in charge of those decisions and still don't have it down.
Yeah, so I think that really it comes down to like, what does success look like? And really success looked like three things for me when we were doing remote work the first time. And by like what success looked like, this is exactly what it didn't look like, because I told you it was a travesty the first time that we did it. The first thing is, are people happy, right? So I know that sounds like a kind of like touchy-feely first thing for, especially having come out of a startup where everything's a little bit rough and tumble and there's sharp edges on everything around you. But really, I think that if people aren't happy and if their work situation is contributing to that in a meaningful way, like you got to really look at that as a leader. The second piece for me is really communications, right? Like, and this kind of comes up in a lot of different ways as a leader is like, hey, when I ask, like, are timelines getting met? Are people understanding what they need to do? Are people getting engaged? One of the biggest things that I see that people, routinely have challenges with, even in in-person meetings, but is amplified in a remote setting in my mind, is one person coming in, like a senior leader, and just coming in and talking the entire time. I generally like if you really value the opinion of the people that you're working with, you probably shouldn't be the one talking 80 to 90% of the meeting. Stuff like that. Like, are your remote workers talking and contributing to meetings? Is it one of those where the meeting is really all the people in the room and you're not even hearing an opinion from the folks on the other side of the line? And, we just, honestly, we were guilty. I was guilty of that as CEO. Just, it's difficult as an adjustment period to start to have to listen to everybody around you. And it's tough. Like, Danny, you work remote all the time. And that's, I think, one of the big things to get right. The third thing that really is measurable is retention, which kind of goes back to like employee happiness. But I would say, like, are the folks that are working remote, are they looking to leave in less than 2 years, which I feel like in our industry is pretty much like, I want everybody to be here at least 2 years. Ideally, like I'm planning for a 4 to 5 year hiring cycle, ideally. But if I don't have somebody in seat for 2 years, for example, things like recruiting fees and a bunch of other stuff really don't make business sense. So kind of like big three, like, are people happy? Are people communicating well? And is retention good? Those are the things I think that really define success around remote work. And I would argue that even though we're all in a pandemic, that those three things are still very important. Maybe the first two more than the third. I don't hear a lot of big job moves happening right now, but I don't think that that'll be the status quo. I think as people are working more remote, those people that don't want to go back into the office, like, I think every company is going to be challenged here in the next 6 months to figure out what remote work looks like for them.
Yeah, and I remember it was tough for me going back, 8 years now. My first remote job when I was with Mandiant, of getting finding my swing, because I'd been in offices, forever, going from a conversation about what executives have to go through to what do the rank and file do, or just what if somebody that is suddenly thrust into this. And I remember being remote, and the first week I made my wife go out with me to the mall every single night just to mall walk, because I felt like I was just missing people. And then fast forward 8 years later, the pendulum has almost swung completely wrong the other way, and to the point where I'm almost a shut-in, and I have to remember, Danny, leave the house. Danny, work on your social graces. Danny, please get dressed. For the love of God, please get dressed. So it really is an acquired skill to people would think oh, I can work from home now and I can focus on this and do this. It's not necessarily the case, because you're in your comfort zone now. And so how do you stay motivated, and how do you track projects, and how do you hold yourself accountable? If you don't feel like wearing pants that day, by the way, pro tip, everybody should wear pants, because you should feel like you're at work at least a little bit. So Will, just for you personally, how do you keep yourself on task? How do you keep yourself motivated? You do fairly well just working on your own, right?
Yeah. So, I think the experience working literally when it's two people that form a company, definitely helps you realize that you have to get work done, right, all the time. And so for me, I'm actually really big on the whole egg timer, tomato timer thing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I actually have my, any given day, I'll have 4 timers running, in the upper right hand corner of my computer. One is usually set to about 6 minutes. One's usually set to about 20 minutes. And then the other 2 are upcoming events, the next time I need to break out of the activity that I'm doing. But generally speaking, that's how I will actually go through and organize my time. And then in terms of prioritization, I'll sit down every night before next day, go through. I use Trello as a Kanban board. And so I'll actually organize my day out and prioritize things. And I'll have the amount of time it'll take to do something and the activity. And then I'll just kind of go through. So that's day-to-day routine. And then on kind of a week level, I've got everything planned out in big time blocks. So I probably block my calendar a lot more aggressively than most executives. And that's because, at least for me, I don't find that context switching is a productive skill for me. And especially working remote, I just find it's a complete productivity killer. So I can't, if I'm going to do meetings, I'll do meetings for 3-hour block. But to actually get stuff done, I actually do need a solid 3-hour block with no meetings, which for some executives is kind of getting it's the umbilical cord getting cut.
Right.
So you have to figure out how to communicate with your team that isn't in a meeting, which I think is, one of those immediately challenging bits, unfortunately or fortunately, for depending on which side of meetings you're on.
Yeah, I found that was especially for me. I guess the closest thing to that I could describe for it happening to me was when at a certain point, you start to get hey, if you're lucky enough, I have to caveat this, if you're lucky enough to have your own office space, I've been doing this, like I said, for 8 years. So now I can designate a room in my house that is only my office, and I could fill it with as many monitors and screens as I want. But at a certain point, that became, I swear to God, I think at one point 11. I had 11 screens. Maybe 3 of them I had actual work on them. The other ones with it's other stuff. YouTube videos of chicken screaming, that kind of thing. But I found, to me, every time I would have to turn my attention to another monitor, and I saw that the edge, the hardware edge of the monitor, whatever I was doing that was super important on the other one is now all of a sudden on the back burner. It's like there was this physical and mental demarcation point, and the more monitors I had, you could literally divide my attention by those. So when I consolidate all of them into one giant widescreen, which I'm enjoying right now, I actually got much more productive because I don't have that physical separation. I might have a lot of stuff on one screen, but at least it's there. I get the same effect. I have just off camera. I have a giant whiteboard on a tripod that has different projects that I'm doing both for work and personally. I also have a countdown of how many weeks are left in the year. Hey, dummy, how much stuff did you get done? Like, you have 39 weeks left. And also stuff that I accomplished. So it's all those little things. That timer thing is a great tip. I think the app on Mac is called like Pomodoro Timer or something like that. And because also, if you go the other way and you get super productive, you get tunnel vision. You suddenly forget to eat, get up to take a walk, that kind of thing. I got a standing desk, which I never use. Like, it can stand. Like, I can do this. I can do this. But I never stand up. So yeah, it's just those little things. As far as like, so for me, I know the reason I called this episode Business in a Bag is because being remote, luckily we can do it wherever we are. I can't count how many meetings I've taken in like my truck, or may or may not have taken in a bathroom somewhere at a Starbucks because I forgot that my calendar was going to go off. What's the most inopportune place you've ever had to take a meeting in?
Ooh, oh wow.
That you're willing to admit.
Just went deep. Most inopportune place. So, I mean, I think honestly, like the most inconvenient place is always trying to take a call around when you need to clear airport security.
Okay.
Have the mental timer going down of like, well, so I mean, I already told you, like, my days are incredibly very organized, right? So, like, I've got a timer. I know when I need to be going through security, and I'm sure you travel a lot too, Annie. Well, actually, I know you travel a lot, but like, those of us that travel probably a little too much, we know exactly how long it takes to get through airport security. And so I've got like 10 minutes before I go through security calls are always the most stressful. Because like, you're not in a pleasant situation, right? It's loud. You're at the airport. There's tons of people all around you. So there's not a lot of privacy. So you're like trying to find a place to duck out. And then on top of that, you're really in a situation where you got like the doom clock kind of going, and you're like, well, I mean, like, I know if I'm there at least 20 minutes before the flight takes off, I'm probably still going to get on the plane. And like, you're kind of like watching the security line go up and down. So you're like, I mean, there's like 6 people in the pre-check line. That's going to take me about like,
start doing math in your head.
Exactly. There's too many things going on around you, and just like this incredible, like, insidious stress. So like, that to me is the most inopportune place. I think the most annoying place to take calls for me personally, like where I feel the most self-conscious, is actually the back of an Uber, which again, if you travel too much and you're a Uber or Lyft user, which I'm very guilty of, especially when I'm down in the valley. Dude, I mean, I would hate to be the guy in the front seat that has to listen to a conference call about, widgets, man. Like, and I just think that to me, like, it's this weird, I'd feel so much better if there was like a limo and like it had like a piece of glass that went up so I could at least pretend like there was some privacy. And it's not about my privacy. I think it's more about like, I'm imposing an hour-long conference call on this poor soul that's driving me around San Francisco in the traffic. And I feel terrible about those. Like, those are the ones that make me feel personally the worst. But
right.
Hopefully that question on inopportune, and then I also shared my worst experiences on calls.
I mean, say nothing. I mean, speaking to the CTO for security, say nothing of the security implications of that, because it's the same considerations that we give with, when we're working on our laptops in an airport. Like, do you have a privacy screen? What are you working on? I can't count the number of times I sat next to somebody on an airplane where, I glanced over accidentally, not purposely, but I could see their entire third quarter fiscal budget and tabs for ongoing negotiations and stuff. Like, so that gets a little bit dicey. So maybe another pro tip is that for those of you that are working remotely, not that you can really leave your houses that much or should be in proximity to people that are around you, but you can use this stuff for later too, when everything calms down. getting a privacy screen, making sure that, it's not super sensitive information that you're talking about, like not taking meetings, because so many people do that. I hear it sales guys all the time. Oh no, here's our rate. We got to undercut them by this, and it's X company. And it's exactly this person. Here's their social security number. Like, just having that stuff out in the open like that. So what's in? Actually, this is one of my favorite ones that I do with my friends who travel a lot too. What's in your go bag, right? Like what do you have in your bag where, if something went down, being the executive, if something went down, I could spin up an entire working environment right now.
Yeah. So, and I think my working environment's probably a little different than some folks. So I'm a big fan of using a cloud desktop for work. A lot of that has to do with, like, I'm on so many different devices throughout the course of the day, especially if I'm traveling. I'm on a phone, I'm on an iPad, I'm on a laptop. I am like constantly opening and closing my laptop. So like if I'm relying on that to like keep state, I don't want to run out of battery, like all these different kind of like challenges. So like I'll actually use a VDI instance for core working, just because it gives me that flexibility of like, hey, I've got all my desktop versions of everything. When I close my, when I close my connection to it, it's exactly where I left off when I bring it back on. So for me, actually, a lot of the stuff that I need is an internet connection. So I actually carry an LTE hotspot with me. It's one of those big ones that has the battery pack embedded in it, so it can last for like a day of me actually using it, which is great. I carry a laptop. I have tried not carrying a laptop at various occasions. If you want to talk about that, I can talk about what that was like. I carry a 10.5 or 11-inch iPad Pro with an LTE modem in it, which is one of my favorite devices that I have, period. Have a water bottle. And then really, like, outside of that, I think like a lot of people, I carry, so I use the Eagle Creek bags. So kind of
I was
like,
just about to ask you what bag you use.
Yep. Yeah. So I use, I have a GoRuck GR5, I think is the big kid that I carry around in the back. And then inside of that, I have a bunch of Eagle Creek bags. Other go-tos are the Bose Quiet Comfort noise canceling headphones.
Where mine are laying around here somewhere. I know I have them. Yeah, no, I got those.
Those are always in there. Yeah, and then in one of those Eagle Creek bags, I'll have just like meds, which I know you get yourself around the conference circuit as well, Danny. But coughs, colds, sniffles, throat lozenges, because you're suddenly going from talking maybe 3 hours a day to like 12 hours a day. And a lot of people don't realize that throat lozenges proactively are a great way to keep your voice from getting completely shredded. So like as soon as you start to get that throat tickle, like that's for me a pro move that someone shared with me a long time ago. So I have that bag in there. And then I have all my electronics. I keep a phone charger in there, so I keep a separate from the hotspot. I keep a separate portable charger in there, and I have another Eagle Creek bag that's nothing but cables. So that's all the chargers and stuff for all of my different devices. And that's actually this is probably getting more into like travel tips, but that's got everything in it.
Yeah.
So I don't ever take anything out of that when I'm at home, and that's really good for making sure I have what I need when I need it. So yeah, that's kind of that's what's in my go bag.
Yeah, I mean, and yes, this borders on getting into travel tips of people that actually get to go places. But one of the other motivations for me wanting to do this, and why I thought it was such a good idea when the topic got brought up, is because it's all going to get back to some semblance of normal eventually. Kind of like how, I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes I sit back and be like, if I won the lottery, what would I buy with this stuff? And it's a fun exercise, and it makes me happy to think, how many rubber chickens that scream can I buy with $6 million? And what does that sound like? It's just a fun little thought. Maybe a thought exercise for your next executive meeting. I don't know. Give it a try. But talking about travel tips, and when we finally get to travel again, I don't know, gives me a little bit of hope. Maybe gives me a little bit of reason to carry on. So, dual purpose. My bag is a Peak Designs camera bag. Very nice. I am a bag diva when it comes to these things. I have been through so many. I've been through the Go Rucks. I've been through all the tactical ones that all the cool kids wear. Camera bags are the best because they have shelves in them, because cameramen have lenses and shelves and stuff. So on the bottom shelf, I have a portable surge protector. It is a little cube that has 3 regular plugs and 3 USBs on them. This makes you the most popular person in the terminal. When you were sitting there on a delay and you can hook in 6 different people on this thing, it is like you're the Sultan. It is amazing. So I have that. And then I have one of those, you talked about all the wires and stuff, a wire organizer that organizes all that stuff. It's this little pouch that goes in tray 2. And then, yes, the wireless hotspot is absolutely in there. 2 portable power bricks, the Bose headphones, my Switch, if it fits in there, which it normally does because it has pockets and zippers for days. And, laptop. I would love to try to live sans laptop, but like you said, you didn't do very well for you with that.
So it really depends on what the activity is. So like if I go to like Black Hat, I usually won't take it anymore. I think the big thing is being able to really get into documents or email. It's just nearly impossible. And the move to VDI is kind of what like let me feel okay, like kind of letting go of that. Mm-hmm. And so like, I mean, I think you probably know, like I used to work for the government, and where I worked in the government, we didn't have cell phones like ever. Right. And so like one of the weirdest things is like getting comfortable without a cell phone. And like you get to the point where you just leave it at home because you're like, I mean, I'm not going to, do I want it to cook in my car all day? Right.
Right.
And I think that for tech work, laptops are similar, right? I mean, like it's the one place where you can go to pretty much get anything done. It's got all of your things that you need. But man, it's challenging to let go of, but once you do, it is incredibly freeing. And I don't know if you've had any back issues related to your bag, but unfortunately, I was actually when I was on the recruiting trip to pull in our mutual friend Steve and Hank into Iceberg. I like got up wrong out of an airport chair, which are, by the way, the worst chairs. So if there's a anti-endorsement that I can do for airport chairs, terminal, like don't sit on those, just stand. It'll be better for your back. But yeah, man, no. So I've gotten really sensitive to like how much weight I put in there and making sure I take care of me too. And I think that one of the big things, like you kind of talked about it earlier with working remote, I think a lot of people kind of rush to get a dedicated space, which is great. Then they kind of kit it out. But I think that there's something to be said for workplace minimalism. You talked about how you're up to 5 monitors. I actually am down to, I mean, you can see a couple in the background, but I'm actually down to like one that I use primarily. And then I will occasionally switch to a second monitor. I definitely think that there is such a thing as information overload and, just getting distracted, but also like, the most jealous I am of other people's work from home setups is like where it's like the one thing just sitting on the table and the table's clean.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's like, that's a really interesting thing to look at is like, how do you get your peak productivity with minimalism when you're now in your home office? So like you can, have anything you want in there, right? It's not like you're at work and you only have like this little cubicle area or like your little desk. You now can have anything. I think that's going to be a big adjustment period for folks. And then I think that probably like the biggest thing that I see as like a major working from home challenge is routines. Like, I don't know what yours looks like, Danny, but for me, like I've got a whole 15-minute thing when I sit down at my desk to do work.
Yeah.
Even when I sit down at my desk to like, boot up a video game or something like that. Like there's like a solid 15 minutes that I need to like get in the zone, which is a little embarrassing to admit publicly, but at the time, like it's just what works for me. And I think that that's, people drive to the office for 15 minutes. And I mean, that's what I do when I'm not working remote, but without that time, it's tough to get to the mental place,
dude,
right?
In the grand scheme of things that people are currently doing, working from home, I'm sure a 15-minute warm-up is the least embarrassing thing people are going to admit to. I do much the same thing. And actually, it's relatively new for me. I mentioned my stand-up whiteboard that I've tried the whole Trello thing. I've tried all the different I mean, I still love OneNote, like for long-term things, but like to be organized, sometimes I just have to go back a few steps and go, I'm getting a whiteboard, a physical thing that I can look at all the time. That's not a screen that I can write on. And I sit and I stare at it for like the first 20 minutes of my day, not obsessing per se, but just processing. And sometimes I'm reading it. Sometimes I'm thinking about it. Sometimes I'm finding one little bit of white space and just staring at it. And then I'm like, it's kind of like that scene in like Gone in 60 Seconds where they start to go stealing the cars and they put on Lowrider first. And then it goes, let's ride. It's that. It's exactly that. Say nothing. We can have all the organization in the world. We can have all of these tips and tricks and timers and these things. And yet those of us with kids, that stuff doesn't matter at a certain point because they just like to be like, hey, Dad, I am coming in your office fully naked and you're on a conference call. What do you do with that?
My 2-year-old screams, what does he scream? Lose it. And he takes it very literally. Like when he comes into my office to lose something, he's literally coming in to put something into my office, which will then be lost. He doesn't like always, he's like very literal. We're going through a literal phase right now. But no, I mean, I think kids are definitely one of those, like I would put under the category of like danger of work from home. I would say kids are their spouse that doesn't usually work from home. I don't know if your wife usually works from home or not, Danny, but
shit just started like 2 days a week. And now it's full on lockdown.
Yeah. And so when you take that, so a spouse that doesn't usually work from home, and then you add kids in the mix. Really, the only other thing that we were talking about, and you mentioned it earlier, is like when you're in the zone, getting out of the zone and paying attention to the world around you. I've heard a lot of reports from the peanut gallery of folks that are like, having difficulty separating and getting that work time and home time. That's really interesting to kind of look at how remote work puts that into a really digestible view for people in the current landscape. Because I mean, it's always something as a senior executive, you're talking about like, oh, what's our work from home balance? What's life like here working here? But when you're literally always working from home and you've got a spouse and kids running around, like I feel like that brings a whole nother layer of meaning on top of that because you need I mean, like I told you, like I need dedicated time blocks. Otherwise I don't get anywhere near peak productivity. Right. So, yeah, man, I'm curious what your experiences have been with that transition, but definitely I'd say those are the 3 danger areas around work for sure.
So, yeah, as much as I fancy myself a veteran work from homer and have all these tips and setups and like, I can do it now, I'm fully productive. Man, my son, he's 4.5, apple of my eye that he has been home for 2 weeks straight. And that, we're kind of in a routine now, but those first 3 or 4 days, whoa! And I love the lad, and he is funny, and he likes to tell me how funny he is, and then he will come in to the office. God forbid that I did not close the door. Actually, that doesn't even matter because he knows how to open doors now. And he will come in as the day he was born. And proceed to just be like, Daddy, look at my, and I'm like, bro, luckily it's mostly always on stand-ups with our own team and our team, like, that's awesome. But I have yet to be on with like Shane or somebody and have that happen. Now for me, and I know this could take acclimation. Maybe certain people watching this, like maybe it's not as quite as free flowing as maybe our teams are here. And, general security departments and hackers are kind of weird by nature. I like seeing cats coming across my monitors. I like seeing kids barging in. I like, provided there's not some kind of giant domestic dispute happening at that moment and it's just all fun and games, that's awesome. And I've heard tell, I don't know if it's, overblown or whatever of like, bosses and things and supervisors getting very, antsy about that kind of thing. And you must have perfect quiet and perfect still and blah, blah, blah. Not going to happen, man. Like, I think as soon as people start coming around to the fact of like, we're all in this weird space now, time to relax a little bit. But he's pretty good. Anyway, he's pretty good, my son. It's mostly the animals I have to worry about that barge in. There's been quite a few cat butt directly, not even like off to the side or peripherally, right here. And I'm just like, man, I'm just going to let it happen. That's fine. But yeah, and my wife had recently started and just getting used to the fact of being free to not drive every day. And now she has to like, he's a natural mama's boy, so he'll be down there with her nonstop, and then I have to keep gauge of that to make sure she doesn't go crazy. And it ends up being, it's teamwork, man. As much of teamwork as it is for a company to do this and be cohesive and be productive. Now you have a second team to watch out for, and making sure that, like you had mentioned before, Will, that now you're in your home, and they always say, don't take work home with you. What do you do when your work is at home? And your fun place, your den is now your office. How do you mentally separate that? Like, so next obvious question for you is, how do you unwind, man? Like you've been going nonstop for years now between Iceberg and Gigamon and looking after all of us monkeys underneath you. How do you personally, Will, CEO of Iceberg, CTO for security of Gigamon, one of the biggest companies around, how do you just wind down, man? Especially when you got to be in your house, like, and you're not allowed to necessarily go to the movies because nothing's open. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so actually, it's a really good question. I think that it's one that has shifted drastically given the pandemic. Because, like, let's say that you're done with conference calls at 5 and your spouse is commuting home. Like, you get a little bit of, like, I would say, bubble time.
Yeah, a little buffer zone.
Right? Yeah, you get that. Like, you're kind of like, you're not here, but you're not there, right? Even if you're working from home or, like, you're working remote from, like, hotel room or something like that, like, you'll just get these little spaces where it's like, okay, this is me time. I think the hardest thing in winding down is, like, actually finding me time. And so it's been, I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, what that means for me, especially given like we're all in close proximity, my office is now also where like I have to figure out where I'm going to not, do anything that is to wind down that doesn't involve everyone. And so I think that that's also generated a little animosity around the fact that I have an office at home. Not everybody who's currently working from home from my residence has their own office.
Right.
So, I think that's a little more challenging. But I mean, I think that, all the typical stuff you'd expect from other, security folks. I enjoy doing technical work. It's a good way to wind down. I enjoy reading a lot. On the work front, I've actually been going back through Practical Malware Analysis, which is Mike Sicko's book. It's
seminal security book.
One of my favorite, like, very well written and a very good book, very useful. So I've been going back through that on the work front. And then, on the personal front, I just finished the Expanse series up until where it is. So, I mean, I try to do a little bit of reading and have a book on each side. But generally, that's it. And, unfortunately, just like everything else in my life right now, that's not family. I've got a timer up. So usually try to spend about 20, 30 minutes tops on that. Otherwise, I'll either hear like screaming or, my son will start knocking on the door.
Right.
Something like life happens outside of the stay-at-home office.
Yeah.
So I think the other piece is like, being a little more flexible about checking in throughout the day and communicating better at home. Also, I think that's one of those things that strangely starts to go out the window as you get to working remote, where you get to just spending all your time in one space with someone. Sometimes communication is one of those things like you really have to think about, like, how am I communicating? What am I saying? What am I doing? Because it's really easy when you're in close proximity to just stop communicating I think similarly, when you're working remote with a team that isn't a remote team for the first time, like it's similar, right? Like you have to think more about like, hey, we used to see each other like getting coffee 5 times a day, which Danny, I don't know if you've heard the full story around the coffee machine in the Gigmon Seattle office, the former office, but it's a legendary machine, and a lot of work gets done around that, right? Just kind of like checking in, communicating.
Yeah,
like right in the middle of the kitchen. It was our very Seattle answer to all those companies that have like a full on like keg in the middle of their office.
Yeah,
it's coffee. Like that's the.
And by the way, thank you for that, because when I'm on site, it is I don't even want to go to Starbucks. That coffee machine is amazing. I've gotten so many of my blog ideas sussed out just because I was standing around talking to people around there. So now, while I have not heard exact stories, I've experienced it, and I never thought I would hear myself say that. Like, because when I first started coming to Seattle, it took me a while to get used to it, and now I really miss it, and I miss being on site. Not mostly for the team, I love them, but it's for that coffee machine.
Dude, it's one of my favorite things. We actually, Cafe Vita is our coffee supplier of choice, which, they're local here up in Seattle. They do a great job.
It's so good.
We go all out with that thing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's that, I said like the number 2 measure for remote work is like communications. Like how well are we communicating? And, it's funny being on the leadership side. It's easy to forget that everyone's always communicating. And I recently saw an internal video that involved what I believe is a 4-foot bronze eagle statue in the background. And, I think it's one of those things where, obviously the person in the video is the one talking, so you think you're the one communicating and the only person communicating and the only thing communicating. But, honestly, when you choose not to do like a stock background, which I, for better or for worse, chose to just out of my office. If you were talking about working from home, it was appropriate. But when you choose to put a 4-foot bronze eagle in the background of your video, like, I mean, that thing is doing some communicating, and like, what is it telling people? Like, this is like, and it's funny because like, I think being, having run the show at Iceberg and now being, just on the exec team at Gigamon, like these are the kinds of things that like you start to have to watch out for as a startup, because like, doesn't matter when there's 5 people, starts to really matter when there's 50, right? Communications is really, really one of those critical ones. But yeah, I think honestly, to this day, and it was a couple of weeks ago, I'm still curious, like, what was the message we were supposed to get from that 4-foot bronze eagle statue? And like, was it intentional? Was it not intentional? Like, is this about freedom, vanilla ice cream and apple pie? Like,
I just want to fly. I wish I was a bird.
Right. Like this is the most imposing thing I could find in my house. So I put it here to give you like a sense of like, is it gravitas? Is it, I mean, like
establishing dominance.
Danny, I mean,
I got halfway through one of my last meetings with somebody that wasn't on my team. And I forgot that I had to put my virtual Zoom background as a stack of rainbow pancakes. Read into that what you will. I was just really hungry that day. And I got into the meeting, and I think it was with marketing, and I was explaining things. We were going over ideas, and then I was like, shit, I've had pancakes up in my background for the past 30 minutes. Oops. Could be worse things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's, dude, it's when you don't have the coffee machine, when you don't have that watering hole, like, I think that's, one of those big challenges. And then also like embracing things like remote, it's interesting because like you've seen so many companies like just do a hard switch over remote work. And so, previously when you're working remote or you're working from the, like I said, from a hotel room, right? You're on the road, you're traveling. It's really hard because like, a bunch of people are in the room having a conversation, looking at like facial expressions, all of that. And you're like, outside of airport security, you're
right. Right.
Danny, according to your story, you're in the bathroom at Starbucks, like, but at the same time, like your voice, like if you if you're on the meeting, you should be contributing something, right? And like everyone you include in the meeting should be there to do something or provide a perspective or a counterpoint. And I think that to me, that's just so fascinating to watch like the cutover from like, screw the remote guys, like we'll kind of not worry about them, that I've heard of in a lot of large companies. You know, a lot of the remote folks feel isolated or left out. It's feedback I've gotten. I told you we messed up remote work once, so know that very well. I've received that direct feedback. And, you know, growing that into like, hey, like using, I don't know if you've seen the new Surface devices. So the full-on VTC ones that have the board integrated with the camera and the screen. Those are incredible. I wish I had one of those in my home office. It's also a giant TV, which, you know, too shabby. You have the Zoom rooms, right? You know, we have those at work. But you have so many interesting things that enable telepresence and enable these things to be more inclusive. You know, I hope that people who haven't ever worked remote, who are now working remote, take that back with them. Like I'm hoping that when this all kind of clears, the people that are on the road or remote aren't, you know, kind of back to being, you know, relegated as second-class citizens in meetings. Like, you know, the nice thing about everyone being remote is it's kind of democratized the remote meeting. But, you know, I hope we don't go back to a place where, you know, anybody who's not in the room is, you know.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually like a really great point to end on, because the whole theme of this whole thing, we can talk about what kind of chairs to get and like what kind of space to create and how many monitors you're gonna do, but it really all comes down to that communication. Because I have been in companies and I couldn't really put a finger on it. And actually, until you just said I couldn't put a finger on why I didn't like it, is because remote is like, we know we're not there, but we're there for the conversation. But being made to be reminded of you're not there and therefore second class and nothing and not somebody to be concerned about. It is a, you know, I love my gigs, so I'm not going anywhere. But whenever anybody goes to go find a gig, you know, I always ask, how do you task being remote? How do you stay in communication? What do you use? My team has voluntarily started using our video cameras because we miss seeing each other. No, you know, that's optional. Nobody should be made to put their video camera on, but doing things like that and making people feel included. And if you hadn't before, I hope that they will now, because now we all have to do that. So it's all about communication and being able to be feel included, even if you're, you know, 6,000 miles away. It's not going away, you know, anytime soon. But I think as the weeks go on, I hope at least there's lessons learned in this. By the way, for my part, Gigamon does this very well. Iceberg did it incredibly, because it is, as much as it is an acquired skill to be the person working from home, it's an even greater acquired skill to be the person responsible for those people working from home and to make sure that they feel included. And that's a two-way street, man. You can't just be at home and slack off and miss meetings and then, you know, feel like you're not included, because, you know, there's a great degree of personal responsibility there. But I think we do it really well. And I think of all the things we've talked about, I hope it helps whoever is watching this out a little bit. And maybe if nothing else, you're not in it alone. We're all figuring out how to work from coffee tables and dark corners where the kids can't find us, and maybe somewhere that there's not cat hair. Doesn't exist in my house. So, but dude, this was awesome. I like that I'm home now more, that I can do things like this and we can spin this up. I hope you stay as productive. I'm going to gush a little bit and say I was a fan of yours before I ever got here, and I'm an even bigger fan of yours now that I'm here. And I hope that people took something away from this. So Will, dude, thank you so much for carving out time in 7 or 8 of your timers to come and chat with me.
Thanks a lot, Danny. I really appreciate it. It was great talking.
All right, man. Talk soon.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the Gigamon Thread Insight cast. That's going to wrap a busy Monday for us. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Tuesday, which means it's John Willis Day. John will be on with his guest at 11 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be announcing who it is. Actually, I think John's already sent it in. It's another. John's just been having some amazing guests that he interviews. So don't miss that. We have a lot more in addition to John, though. So join us tomorrow. But until then, let's hoping you're staying safe and well and strong. TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.